Hi guys, tonight we leave behind busy streets, glowing screens, and the endless little reminders of modern life. Instead, you find yourself standing beneath a sky so clear that every star seems close enough to touch. Around you stretches a vast ice age landscape of rolling grasslands, scattered forests, distant snowy hills, and quiet limestone caves tucked into the rocky slopes. The air is cool, carrying the faint smell of damp earth, fresh pine, and wood smoke drifting from a fire hidden somewhere ahead. Far away, you hear the soft calls of wild birds settling for the evening, while somewhere beyond the valley, a herd of mammoths slowly makes its way across the open plain. This is a world with no cities, no roads, and no written history, only people, nature, and the long patience of survival. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're here, let me know where you're listening from and what your local time is. It's always fascinating to imagine all of us gathering around the same ancient campfire from different corners of the modern world. Now, dim the lights, and let your breathing settle into the quiet rhythm of this forgotten age. You stand at the edge of a broad valley nearly 40,000 years ago, during the Upper Paleolithic period. The climate is colder than today. Although not every day is covered in snow, long winters shape the land, while brief summers bring carpets of grasses and wildflowers that attract countless animals. Forests spread across sheltered valleys, and rivers fed by melting ice weave silver ribbons through the landscape. There are no kingdoms, no farms, no markets filled with merchants calling out their prices. Human society is organized into small bands of hunter-gatherers, usually made up of families who depend completely on one another. Every meal, every shelter, and every warm fire is the result of cooperation and careful observation. Today you might check a weather app before leaving home. Here, the clouds, the wind, and the behavior of birds become your forecast. You slowly walk toward a cluster of weathered rocks, where a shallow cave opens into darkness. The stone beneath your feet feels uneven and cool. Tiny wildflowers grow between cracks in the limestone. The entrance is marked by dark stains left from countless fires burning over many generations. Inside, the air changes immediately. It feels warmer, still carrying the gentle scent of smoke that has soaked into the stone over many years. Animal skins cover parts of the ground, creating simple places to rest. Near the center, glowing embers rest beneath a circle of carefully arranged stones. Fire is precious beyond words. Early humans did not simply strike a convenient lighter whenever they wanted warmth. Maintaining a fire required constant attention. If the flames died during cold weather, creating a new one could take tremendous effort using friction or carefully preserved embers carried between camps. You kneel beside the fading warmth and stretch your hands toward it. Even the smallest glow feels comforting against the chilly evening air. Archaeological evidence shows that Upper Paleolithic communities mastered the use of controlled fire for cooking, warmth, protection, and tool-making. Fires also extended daylight, allowing families to prepare food, repair equipment, and share stories long after sunset. Researchers continue to question exactly how much of each evening was spent telling stories compared with performing practical tasks. The truth was likely a peaceful mixture of both. Nearby, an older member of the group carefully examines a piece of flint. With slow, practiced movements, one stone strikes another. A sharp flake breaks away with a crisp clicking sound that echoes softly inside the cave. The process looks surprisingly delicate. One wrong strike can ruin hours of careful preparation. You notice that no one rushes. Patience may be one of humanity's oldest survival skills. Stone tools are not impressive by modern standards. There are no polished handles or shiny metal blades. Yet these carefully shaped flakes can slice meat, scrape hides, cut plants, and carve wood with remarkable efficiency. A small child watches closely beside the elder, learning simply by observing. There are no classrooms, no printed manuals. Knowledge survives because someone remembers. Outside the cave, the evening grows quieter. A cool breeze carries the earthy smell of damp grass and distant water. Somewhere beyond the trees, reindeer move across the valley in search of fresh grazing. You follow several adults walking toward the edge of the open plain. Nobody speaks very much. Communication certainly exists, but silence is equally valuable. Listening carefully may reveal the snapping of a twig beneath an animal's hoof, or the warning call of birds suddenly taking flight. You pause beside fresh footprints pressed into soft mud. The tracks belong to deer. Their sharp outlines tell experienced hunters several important details almost immediately. The animals passed recently. They were moving calmly. None appeared injured or frightened. To you, they may look like simple marks in wet soil. To these hunter-gatherers, they read almost like a familiar book. Modern people often rely on maps and digital navigation. Here, every footprint, broken branch, and flattened patch of grass offers information. Survival depends upon paying attention. The landscape itself becomes a teacher. As the last light begins fading behind distant hills, smoke rises gently from the cave entrance. Its scent drifts across the valley. Not only does smoke signal warmth, it also warns many cautious animals that humans are nearby. Of course, not every creature stays away. Curious wolves sometimes linger at a distance, watching quietly from the darkness. Their relationship with humans remains complicated, sometimes competitors, sometimes simply neighbours sharing the same hunting grounds. Some historians suggest that thousands of years of cautious observation between wolves and humans eventually contributed to the long process that led to domesticated dogs. Others believe the timeline was more gradual and varied across different regions. The debate continues, adding another quiet mystery to humanity's early story. You return toward the shelter as the stars begin filling the night sky. Without electric lights, the heavens appear astonishingly bright. The Milky Way stretches overhead like a pale river of countless tiny lights. It is easy to understand why ancient people across many ages found meaning among the stars. Inside the cave, evening life continues peacefully. Someone carefully turns pieces of meat above glowing coals. The rich smell mixes with wood smoke and roasted roots gathered earlier in the day. Nearby, another person gently scrapes an animal hide with a flint blade, removing the last bits of tissue before the skin can be softened into clothing. Upper Paleolithic people commonly wore practical garments made from animal skins and fur, simple covering, stitched together using bone, needles, and sinew, helped protect them against cold winds that swept across Ice Age landscapes. Bone needles themselves are one of those remarkable little discoveries that often surprise people today. These slender tools allowed surprisingly careful sewing, creating clothing that fit better and conserved valuable body heat. As you sit beside the fire, you begin to realize something comforting. Life before civilization was certainly difficult. Every day demanded effort. Every season brought uncertainty. Yet it was not constant chaos. There were quiet evenings like this one, moments of laughter shared between family members, children growing sleepy beside warm embers, experienced elders patiently shaping tomorrow's tools. The crackling fire continues its gentle conversation with the surrounding darkness. Above the cave, the stars slowly drift across the endless sky, and as your journey into the deep human past has only just begun, you settle comfortably beside the warmth, ready to discover how observation, cooperation, and quiet resilience carried our ancestors through a world that asked everything of them. Morning arrives slowly, almost politely, as a pale silver light spreads across the valley. You wake before the sun climbs above the distant hills, not because of an alarm clock, but because the world around you is already stirring. A gentle breeze slips into the cave entrance, carrying the cool scent of wet grass, pine needles, and fresh river water. somewhere outside. Birds begin calling to one another with short, cheerful notes that echo softly across the open land. The fire from the night before still glows beneath a blanket of grey ash. One of the adults kneels beside it, carefully feeding it thin pieces of dry wood collected the previous afternoon. Tiny flames appear, growing patiently instead of suddenly. Fire rewards steady attention, not hurried movements. You step outside and pause for a moment. The valley seems endless. Golden grasses shimmer with drops of morning dew. Beyond them lie patches of forest filled with birch, pine, and spruce. A winding river reflects the growing light like polished stone. Far away, snow still rests on the higher mountains, reminding everyone that cold weather is never very far away. This landscape is beautiful, but beauty alone never kept anyone alive. During the Upper Paleolithic, people survived because they understood their surroundings in remarkable detail. They learned which plants could be eaten, which berries should be avoided, where animals preferred to drink, and how changing seasons transform the entire landscape. There were no books to explain these things. Nature itself served as the only textbook. You begin walking with a small group heading toward the river. Nobody seems to be wandering without purpose. Even a quiet morning walk has meaning. One person carries a woven pouch made from plant fibers, another holds a wooden spear polished smooth by years of careful use. A child follows closely, carrying nothing heavier than curiosity. You notice how often everyone stops, not because they're tired, because they're paying attention. A broken twig, fresh mud, the direction of the wind. Tiny scratches on the tree bark. Each small detail tells part of a much larger story. To modern eyes, a forest can seem peaceful but uniform. To experienced hunter-gatherers, every part of it has its own personality. The group reaches a patch of berry bushes growing near the edge of the woods. Bright fruits hang beneath green leaves, glistening with moisture. One woman gently points towards another nearby shrub. Its berries look almost identical. Almost. The lesson is simple but unforgettable. One plant provides food, the other may cause serious illness. Children learn these differences gradually over many years, repeating the names and characteristics until they become second nature. Memory is one of the most valuable tools anyone possesses. Today, if you forget something, you might search for it online within seconds. Here, forgetting the wrong detail could have far greater consequences. As you continue deeper into the forest, the air becomes cooler beneath the tall trees. The smell changes as well. Damp moss, rich soil, and fallen leaves create a peaceful, earthy fragrance that fills every breath. Sunlight filters through branches in soft golden beams. Small insects drift lazily through the light. Nothing appears hurried. You begin noticing signs that would have escaped your attention only yesterday. The bark has been rubbed smooth at one height by passing deer. Fresh hoofprints press gently into damp earth. Several mushrooms grow beneath an old fallen log. Not all are safe to eat. Knowing which ones belong in a meal requires years of careful teaching. Scholars remain divided on exactly how extensive prehistoric botanical knowledge became in different regions, but archaeological discoveries continue revealing surprisingly sophisticated use of wild plants for food, medicine, fibers, and even natural dyes. You reach a narrow stream flowing into the larger river. The water is astonishingly clear. Tiny fish dart between smooth stones resting beneath the surface. One member of the group quietly kneels. Watching without moving, you wait beside them. At first, nothing seems to happen. Then you begin noticing movement everywhere. Fish swimming against the current, dragonflies skimming the water, birds waiting patiently on nearby branches. The stream is alive with quiet activity. Observation comes before action. Always. This may be one of humanity's oldest unwritten rules. Nearby, someone gathers long flexible branches from young willow trees. These will later become simple baskets, fish traps, or repairs for shelter. Almost every natural material has more than one purpose. Nothing useful is wasted. You gently run your fingers across the bark of one freshly cut branch. It feels cool and slightly damp. The scent is fresh, almost sweet. Simple materials surround you everywhere, waiting for patient hands to transform them. As midday approaches, the temperature rises pleasantly. The group rests beneath several tall trees overlooking the valley. From here you can see vast stretches of grassland extending toward the horizon. Dark shapes move slowly in the distance. A herd of wild horses grazes peacefully beyond them. Much farther away, enormous mammoths travel together in small family groups. Their thick coats ripple gently in the breeze. Watching them from this distance feels peaceful. Trying to hunt one would require extraordinary planning. Large Ice Age animals provided enormous amounts of food. Hides, bones, and ivory when hunts succeeded. Yet they were never easy targets. Cooperation, careful strategy, and patience mattered far more than reckless bravery. Researchers continue examining evidence about whether mammoth hunts occurred regularly, or whether people more often scavenged animals that had already died naturally. The answer may have varied depending on the region and the opportunities available. The afternoon passes slowly as you continue exploring. You notice patches of edible roots growing in open soil. Several people dig carefully using sharpened wooden sticks. The work is steady but unhurried. Gathering food often supplied a dependable part of daily nutrition. Although dramatic hunts capture much attention today, wild plants, nuts, seeds, fruits, and roots were equally important in many prehistoric communities. It is another gentle reminder that survival rarely depended upon one grand heroic moment. Instead, it depended upon, thousands of ordinary tasks performed well. You smile quietly at the thought. History often celebrates kings and battles. Nature celebrates consistency. Clouds begin drifting across the afternoon sky. A cool wind changes direction almost immediately. Several adults glance upward. Nobody complains about the weather. Nobody checks a forecast. Instead, years of experience guide their decisions. The group begins returning toward the cave before evening rain arrives. You realize this choice was made long before the first raindrop appears. Knowledge often means acting early rather than reacting late. By the time you reach the shelter, soft rain begins tapping gently against leaves and stone. Inside, the cave feels warm and welcoming. Smoke rises lazily toward the ceiling before escaping through natural cracks. Children laugh quietly while arranging smooth stones into little patterns on the ground. An elder patiently repairs a spear shaft using strips of sinew. Another person grinds reddish mineral pigment into fine powder using 2 flat stones. That bright red colour comes from ochre, a natural mineral used by many prehistoric communities. Archaeologists have discovered ochre at numerous Upper Paleolithic sites, suggesting it played roles in decoration, symbolism, and perhaps even practical uses such as preserving hides. Exactly why ochre became so important remains an intriguing question. Some historians suggest its vibrant colour carried symbolic meaning connected with identity or ritual, while others believe its practical benefits may have been equally valuable. Outside, the rain continues softly. Inside, the fire crackles with gentle confidence. You begin understanding that surviving before civilization required much more than strength. It required endless curiosity. Careful listening, sharp eyes, reliable memory, the willingness to learn from older generations, and perhaps most importantly, the patience to notice small changes that many people today might walk past without a second glance. As evening settles over the valley once again, you sit near the familiar warmth of the fire. Beyond the cave entrance, the rain slowly fades, leaving behind the fresh scent of wet earth and clean stone. The land has offered another quiet lesson, reminding you that every successful day in this ancient world begins not with force, but with observation. The morning after, the gentle rain arrives with a different kind of silence. The air feels cleaner, carrying the fresh scent of wet pine, damp stone and rich soil. Tiny drops of water cling to blades of grass, sparkling as the first sunlight reaches the valley. You step outside the cave and take a slow breath. The cool air fills your lungs, and somewhere nearby a woodpecker taps steadily against an old tree. The camp is already awake. Nobody rushes. There is no clock announcing the start of the day. Instead, life follows the rhythm of light, weather, and the quiet needs of the people around you. Your eyes drift toward the center of the shelter. The fire is still alive, not blazing, not roaring, just quietly glowing beneath a layer of pale ash. One person gently stirs the embers with a long stick. Another adds several pieces of carefully dried wood. Within moments, orange flames rise once again, casting warm light across the cave walls. You begin to understand that this simple daily task is one of the most important jobs in the entire camp. Today, warmth arrives with the push of a button thousands of years ago. Warmth depended on attention. Fire changes everything. Before people learned to control it, cold nights limited activity and made survival much harder. Raw food required more effort to digest. Dangerous animals could approach more confidently under the cover of darkness. Winter became even more unforgiving. With fire, the world slowly became a little friendlier. Mainstream archaeological evidence shows that controlled fire played a central role in prehistoric life. It provided warmth during Ice Age winters. Cooked food, hardened wooden spear tips, produced light after sunset, and helped protect camps from many curious predators. You kneel beside the flames. Heat gently reaches your hands. The crackling sound is surprisingly comforting. Each small pop comes from tiny pockets of moisture escaping the wood. The smell of smoke mixes with the scent of pine resin and roasted roots warming beside the coals. It is difficult not to relax. An older member of the group carefully lifts a flat stone that has been resting near the edge of the fire. It is pleasantly warm, not too hot. The stone is placed beneath strips of damp animal hide that are being softened for clothing. Fire is not only used for cooking, it quietly assists with many different tasks throughout the day. Nearby, another person places long wooden spear shafts close to the flames without letting them burn. Gentle heating removes moisture from the wood, making it stronger and slightly harder. Simple discoveries like this may have taken generations to perfect. Nobody wrote instructions, people simply observed. Someone noted, someone remembered, someone taught the next child. You watch a young boy sitting beside his grandmother. She slowly feeds tiny twigs into the fire. The boy copies every movement with careful concentration. She smiles without speaking. Some lessons need very few words. Knowledge passes from one pair of hands to another. Researchers continue to question exactly how early teaching was organized in prehistoric societies, but evidence strongly suggests that children learned through observation, imitation, and steady participation in everyday life rather than formal instruction. The lesson unfolding before you feels timeless. Outside, several adults leave to gather more fuel before the afternoon. You decide to follow. The forest still smells fresh after yesterday's rain. Soft moss cushions each step. Birdsong echoes gently through the trees. Nobody grabs the first branch they see. Instead, everyone searches carefully. Dead wood burns better than freshly fallen branches. Dry wood creates less smoke. Different trees burn differently. Some produce long-lasting coals. Others ignite quickly but disappear almost as fast. Even gathering firewood requires experience. Today, many people think of wood simply as wood. Here, every tree has its own personality. One woman pauses beside a fallen pine. She breaks off several dry branches with practiced movements. As the branch snaps, a pleasant scent of resin fills the air. You pick up one of the pieces. It feels surprisingly light. Years of drying have prepared it perfectly for the evening fire. The bundles grow steadily larger. Nobody collects more than they can comfortably carry. There is little waste. Every journey has a purpose. Every effort conserves energy. Returning to camp. You notice children collecting smaller sticks along the path. Their work matters too. Tiny branches help awaken sleeping embers before larger logs are added. Even the youngest members contribute in meaningful ways. Cooperation is not reserved for adults. It belongs to everyone. Back inside the shelter, preparations for the midday meal begin. Several pieces of meat are placed above glowing coals using simple wooden supports. Nearby, edible roots wrapped in broad leaves rest beneath warm ashes. Cooking fills the cave with rich, earthy aromas. The smell is comforting without being overwhelming. Your stomach quietly reminds you that people thousands of years ago appreciated good food just as much as anyone today. Cooking offered more than pleasant flavors. Scientific research suggests that cooked food made nutrients easier to digest while reducing many harmful microorganisms. This allowed people to gain more energy from their meals and may have supported the increasing energy demands of larger human brains over evolutionary time. Scholars remain divided on precisely how great the long-term evolutionary effects of cooking were, but few question its enormous importance for daily survival. You slowly taste a roasted root offered by one of the gatherers. Its flavor is mild, slightly sweet, much softer than it would have been raw. Simple food becomes deeply satisfying after a morning spent outdoors. The afternoon unfolds peacefully. Rain clouds have disappeared, leaving soft blue skies stretching across the valley. The fire continues burning quietly as people repair clothing, sharpen stone tools, and prepare supplies for tomorrow. Smoke drifts lazily upward, carrying tiny sparks that disappear before reaching the cave ceiling. You notice dark marks covering parts of the stone walls. Layer upon layer of smoke has left its signature over countless generations. Every fire has added another invisible page to the story of the shelter. Near the entrance, an elder reaches into a small leather pouch. Inside are carefully protected pieces of flint and iron-rich stone. Although the camp works hard to keep the fire alive continuously, everyone understands that accidents happen. Having the materials to create a new flame is another form of security. The process requires patience. A sharp strike sends tiny sparks onto carefully prepared dry plant fibers. Nothing happens. Another strike. Still nothing. Then one tiny ember begins glowing. Someone gently blows warm air across it. The ember brightens. Thin smoke curls upward. Another careful breath. Suddenly, a small flame appears. No one cheers, no one claps. Success is greeted with quiet satisfaction. This has happened many times before. Even so, it still feels a little magical. One lesser-known archaeological detail is that prehistoric people often carried carefully preserved embers during travel, rather than creating completely new fires every time they moved camp. Slow-burning materials could protect glowing coals for surprisingly long periods, saving valuable time and effort. As evening approaches, the temperature begins falling once more. The fire becomes the natural gathering place. People sit in a loose circle. Some repair clothing. Others shape bone tools. Children lean comfortably against their parents. The warm light dances across familiar faces. Outside the cave, the world gradually darkens. A distant wolf howls somewhere beyond the valley. Another answers from farther away. The sounds are not frightening. They are simply reminders that humans share this landscape with many other lives. The flames continue flickering. Their steady glow pushes back the darkness just enough to create a little island of warmth. You find yourself watching the dancing light almost without thinking. Perhaps people have always done this. Perhaps fire has always invited quiet reflection. You realize that this ancient invention did far more than warm cold hands. It gathered families, protected knowledge, cooked meals, strengthened tools, extended conversations into the night. It transformed caves into homes and strangers into companions. As another peaceful evening settles across the Ice Age valley, you sit a little closer to the familiar warmth. The crackling wood, the gentle scent of smoke, and the soft glow upon the stone walls become part of the memory you are slowly building. In this vast ancient world, every carefully tended flame is a quiet promise that tomorrow can begin again. Another dawn arrives without fanfare. The sky begins as a deep shade of blue, then slowly softens into pale grey before the first hints of gold appear above the eastern hills. You step outside the cave with the familiar coolness of morning brushing against your face. The air carries the clean scent of grass covered in dew, mixed with the faint smoky fragrance that seems to linger around the camp no matter the season. The valley feels peaceful. A few birds flutter between low branches, searching for insects awakened by the rising sun. Far across the grasslands, a small herd of reindeer moves steadily toward fresh grazing. Their calm pace reminds you that life here rarely hurries. Every creature follows rhythms that have been shaped over thousands of years. The people around you are already beginning another important task. Today is not centered on hunting, it is a day for making tools. You might imagine prehistoric tool making as loud, dramatic work with flying sparks and constant pounding. The reality is quieter, much quieter. The sounds that fill the camp are gentle taps of stone against stone, soft scraping noises, and occasional conversations carried in calm voices. The atmosphere feels almost like a peaceful workshop. During the Upper Paleolithic, stone technology reached remarkable levels of refinement. People produced carefully shaped blades, scrapers, burins, spear points, and many specialized tools that allowed them to process food, prepare hides, carve wood, and work bone. These objects may appear simple today, but each represented countless generations of accumulated knowledge. You settle beside an experienced craftsperson sitting on a flat rock near the cave entrance. Several pieces of flint lie arranged neatly before them. Not every stone will do. Flint is valued because it breaks in predictable ways, producing edges that are astonishingly sharp. You pick up one untouched piece. Its surface feels cool and smooth in some places, rough in others. Tiny patterns run through the grey stone like frozen waves. The craftsperson studies it for several quiet moments before making the first strike. Click. A thin flake separates cleanly. Another careful strike follows. Click. The shape begins changing little by little. Nothing feels rushed. Each movement seems planned long before the hammerstone touches at the flint. You begin realizing that patience shapes the tool as much as strength does. One careless blow could waste valuable material. Today, if a kitchen knife becomes dull, you can replace it with another. In this world, every useful piece of stone is important. Suitable flint may require long journeys or careful trade between neighbouring groups. Yes, even before civilization, people exchanged valuable materials. Archaeologists have discovered stone from distant sources at many prehistoric sites, suggesting that some communities travelled widely or maintained networks of contact with others. These exchanges may have involved gifts, seasonal meetings, or other forms of cooperation. Researchers continue examining how extensive these early exchange networks became, since the evidence varies from region to region. As the morning continues, another member of the group begins working with bone instead of stone. The long leg bone of a large animal has already been cleaned and dried. Using a flint scraper, they slowly shape one end into a slender point. Tiny curls of pale bone collect on the ground. The work requires surprising precision. Bone is lighter than stone in many situations and can be crafted into needles, fish hooks, spear points, smooth handles, and decorative objects. You gently hold a finished bone needle between your fingers. It feels delicate, almost impossibly delicate. Yet it has survived careful use. The eye of the needle is tiny but perfectly formed. Someone thousands of years ago sat patiently creating this remarkable little object. Bone needles are among the most fascinating discoveries from the Upper Paleolithic. Their appearance allowed people to sew fitted clothing from animal skins, greatly improving protection against cold climates. You glance towards several women repairing garments nearby. Animal hides are stretched across wooden frames. Using sinew taken from large animals, they stitch pieces together with steady hands. The finished clothing is practical rather than decorative. Loose fur faces inward during the coldest weather, trapping warm air close to the body. Simple cloaks, leggings, and coverings provide valuable protection against wind and snow. Of course, appearance still matters a little. One younger woman carefully threads small animal teeth onto a strip of leather. The tiny ornaments make almost no sound as they move. People often imagine prehistoric life as focused entirely on survival. Yet archaeological discoveries tell a richer story. Many communities decorated clothing with shells, beads, animal teeth, carved ivory, and coloured pigments. Beauty found its place beside necessity. Some historians suggest these ornaments signalled family connections, achievements, or identity, while others believe they mainly reflected personal expression. The full meaning remains uncertain. But their careful craftsmanship speaks for itself. Outside the cave, children gather fallen branches. Instead of turning them into toys, they begin practicing with miniature wooden spears. The adults watch closely. No one expects perfection. The children laugh when their throws miss the target. Then they quietly try again. Learning begins early. Skills develop gradually through repetition rather than pressure. One small boy proudly retrieves his spear after it lands only a few steps away. An elder smiles warmly and adjusts his grip. The next throw travels a little farther. Small improvements matter. They always have. You wander toward another part of the camp where several long wooden shafts rest against a large stone. Each has been straightened using gentle heat from the fire. One person slowly scrapes away rough patches using a flint blade. Their fingertips constantly glide along the wood, searching for tiny imperfections that your eyes would probably overlook. Smooth wood flies more predictably. Every detail increases the chance of success during a hunt. Even simple spears contain remarkable craftsmanship. Nearby, sticky tree resin warms inside a small stone container placed close to glowing coals. The pleasant scent reminds you of fresh pine forests after summer rain. When softened, the resin becomes a natural adhesive. It helps secure stone points onto wooden shafts before they are tightly wrapped with strips of sinew. Nature provides almost everything needed. Stone becomes blades, bone becomes needles, wood becomes handles, resin becomes glue, animal tendons become thread. Nothing stands alone, everything works together. The afternoon sun climbs higher, bringing gentle warmth to the valley. A light breeze carries the scent of flowering plants growing along the riverbank. You hear insects buzzing lazily among the grasses. The peaceful sounds blend with the steady tapping of toolmakers continuing their careful work. Hours pass almost unnoticed. Nobody complains of boredom. Every completed tool strengthens the future. Every repaired spear increases confidence. Every sharpened scraper saves time tomorrow. Modern life often celebrates speed. This ancient world quietly celebrates preparation. Late in the afternoon, you notice a small collection of colourful stones resting near one family's sleeping area. Some are red, others are yellow or dark black. These minerals are ground into powders using flat stones. Mixed with animal fat or water, they become pigments used for marking objects, decorating bodies, or perhaps recording meaningful events. One lesser-known detail is that some archaeological sites have revealed carefully prepared pigment kits containing grinding stones, mineral pieces, and containers kept together, suggesting people organize these materials with considerable care. The exact purpose of every pigment remains uncertain. Perhaps some were practical, perhaps some were symbolic, perhaps they were simply beautiful. As evening approaches, the familiar fire grows brighter once again. Freshly completed tools are placed nearby, not displayed with pride, simply ready for tomorrow. You pick up a finished scraper. Its sharp edge catches the firelight. It fits naturally into your hand, shaped not only by stone but by experience passed from one generation to the next. You begin understanding that these tools represent something far greater than technology. They are physical memories. Every technique reflects lessons learned by countless ancestors who patiently observed the world around them without writing. Knowledge still endured. Without cities, innovation still flourished. Without machines, human creativity quietly transformed ordinary materials into extraordinary companions for survival. The evening grows cooler. The stars slowly return above the valley. Beside the gentle crackling of the fire, you feel grateful for every patient hand that chipped stone, polished bone, shaped wood, and quietly carried humanity one careful improvement at a time. The next morning greets you with the sky painted in soft shades of pale blue and silver. A thin mist rests over the valley floor, drifting slowly above the grass like a quiet river of clouds. The air feels cool against your skin, and every breath carries the fresh scent of damp earth, wild sage, and distant pine forests, somewhere nearby. A raven calls once before gliding silently across the open landscape. The camp wakes earlier than usual. Today is different. There is a sense of quiet purpose moving through every small task. No one appears anxious. No one rushes, yet everyone seems to understand that this day will involve a longer journey. The great herds have begun moving again. During the Upper Paleolithic, many large animals followed seasonal patterns in search of fresh grazing, water, and safer breeding grounds. Human communities often adjusted their own movements to match these migrations, rather than remaining in one place throughout the year. Many groups travelled across familiar territories, returning to reliable locations as the seasons changed. You look toward the valley. The distant animals are almost impossible to distinguish with the naked eye. Small dark shapes move slowly against the endless grasslands, but the people beside you notice much more. One hunter studies the horizon for several minutes. Another watches the flight of birds. An older woman kneels beside the ground, gently touching the soil with her fingertips. Without speaking, they begin preparing for departure. You gather only what is necessary: animal skin clothing, stone tools, wooden spears, bundles of dried food, carefully protected embers resting inside a container lined with insulating material. Life remains surprisingly light. Owning too much would simply make travelling harder. Today, many people spend weekends deciding which possessions to organise. Here, every object must justify the effort required to carry it. The sun slowly climbs higher as your group leaves the cave behind. You glance back once. The familiar shelter stands quietly beneath its rocky overhang. Smoke no longer rises from the entrance. For now, the cave returns to silence. Perhaps another family will use it in a different season. Perhaps your own group will return months later. Nothing feels permanent. The journey begins across open grassland. The ground feels springy beneath your feet. Tiny flowers bloom among tall grasses, attracting butterflies and buzzing insects. The breeze carries the gentle rustling of countless stems moving together. It sounds almost like waves upon a distant shore. Walking becomes almost meditative. Nobody hurries. Everyone conserves energy. The youngest children ride for short distances on the shoulders of adults before eagerly walking again. Older children help carry small bundles. Even simple contributions matter. As the morning continues, fresh tracks appear in patches of soft earth. The hunters pause. You kneel beside them. Large hoof prints press deeply into the damp soil. Their rounded edges remain crisp. These animals passed recently. One hunter points towards several broken stems. Another notices scattered droppings that have not yet fully dried. Every clue adds another piece to the picture. Reading tracks is less about finding a single perfect footprint and more about gathering many small details: direction, speed, numbers, condition. The landscape quietly shares its information with anyone patient enough to notice. You continue walking until the valley opens into a vast plain stretching farther than you can comfortably see. Here the wind blows freely across endless grasses. In the distance, hundreds of reindeer move together. The herd flows across the land like a slow river. Calves remain close to their mothers. Older animals stay near the edges. The sight feels peaceful rather than dramatic. You simply watch. Observation always comes before action. The hunters spend a long time studying the herd. Nobody immediately reaches for a spear. Success depends upon understanding movement. Which direction are the animals travelling? Where will they cross the river? Which paths have they followed before? Years of experience answer these questions far better than guesswork. Researchers continue examining evidence about prehistoric hunting strategies. Some archaeological sites suggest carefully planned drives using natural landscape features such as valleys, cliffs, or narrow passes. Other evidence points towards smaller opportunistic hunts targeting isolated animals. Different environments likely encourage different methods. You begin noticing how often the hunters use the land itself. Low hills hide their movements. Small stands of trees provide cover. Shallow streams reduce scent carried by the wind. Nature becomes a quiet partner. Far overhead, several birds circle lazily. One elder watches them closely. Large birds sometimes gather where animals have died naturally. Even scavengers can offer useful information. Nothing in this landscape exists in isolation. Everything connects. By midday, the group rests beside a winding stream. Clear water slips gently over smooth stones, creating a soft, steady sound that immediately relaxes you. Several people refill skin containers. Others gather edible plants growing along the banks. Children splash their hands in the cool water before being gently reminded not to stray too far. Lunch is wonderfully simple: dried meat, wild berries gathered earlier in the season, roasted roots carried from camp, fresh water that tastes astonishingly clean. There are no elaborate recipes, no polished plates, yet eating outdoors beneath an endless sky feels deeply satisfying. You notice one woman carefully collecting smooth rounded stones from the stream. At first they seem ordinary. Then she explains through gestures that these stones hold heat well. Later they can be warmed in the fire and used for cooking or maintaining warmth inside sleeping areas. One lesser-known archaeological detail is that heated stones were sometimes used in various prehistoric cooking techniques, allowing food to cook evenly without direct contact with flames. Simple discoveries often made everyday life a little easier. The afternoon journey continues. Clouds drift lazily overhead. A gentle wind cools your face. Far away you spot a small group of wild horses grazing peacefully. Unlike the nervous reindeer, these horses occasionally stop to watch your group before returning to feeding. Their dark manes ripple softly in the breeze. Not every animal becomes prey. Sometimes watching animals simply teaches valuable lessons about the landscape. Where horses find water, other species may appear as well. Where grazing remains healthy, future hunting opportunities often improve. Knowledge grows through constant observation. As evening approaches, your group reaches a familiar seasonal campsite beside a broad river. Several old fire circles remain visible beneath patches of grass. The place has clearly been used before, perhaps many times. Temporary shelters begin taking shape. Long wooden poles lean together. Animal skins stretch across simple frames. Within a surprisingly short time, a comfortable camp emerges. Upper Paleolithic communities often returned to favoured locations that offered dependable water, shelter, raw materials, or access to migrating animals. Although they remained mobile, many landscapes became deeply familiar through repeated seasonal visits. Some historians suggest certain camps functioned as important gathering places where different groups met to exchange materials, arrange partnerships, and share knowledge. Others believe such meetings occurred less frequently than once imagined. Archaeologists continue studying these possibilities through the distribution of tools, ornaments, and other artifacts. As darkness gently settles across the plain, the fire comes alive once more. Its warm glow reflects upon the quiet river. Tiny insects dance above the surface of the water. Somewhere downstream, frogs begin calling into the evening. The familiar sounds create an atmosphere of calm. You sit beside the fire watching sparks drift upward into the deepening night. The stars slowly appear one by one. Above you stretches the same sky your ancestors knew. No buildings interrupt the horizon. No engines disturb the silence. Only wind, water, fire, and people who have learned that survival is not about conquering nature. It is about moving with it, following the seasons instead of resisting them, accepting change instead of fearing it. Every journey across these ancient landscapes strengthens memory. Every migration teaches another lesson. Every returning herd reminds you that the world has its own patient rhythm. As you settle comfortably beside the river, listening to the gentle crackle of burning wood and the distant breathing of animals across the grasslands, you realize that following the great herds is about far more than finding food. It is about learning to trust the quiet patterns of a living world that has guided countless generations before you. Morning arrives beside the broad river with a quiet confidence. A thin ribbon of mist drifts above the water, moving so slowly that it almost seems to stand still. The first rays of sunlight touch the tops of the grasses, turning countless drops of dew into tiny points of light. The air is cool enough that you can feel it against your cheeks. Yet the promise of a warmer afternoon is already beginning to rise with the sun. The camp stirs gently. Someone adds fresh wood to the fire, sending a soft stream of fragrant smoke into the still morning air. Others stretch after a restful night beneath carefully stitched animal skins. Children step outside, blinking at the brightness, their footprints pressing lightly into the damp earth. You take a slow walk toward the riverbank. The water flows steadily past smooth stones polished by thousands of years of movement. Small fish flash beneath the surface before disappearing into deeper pools. Dragonflies skim across the water, their wings catching the sunlight for only a heartbeat before becoming nearly invisible again. Everything feels calm, yet every person in the camp knows that another day of finding food has begun. Life before agriculture depended on variety. No single source of food could be trusted throughout the entire year. Animal migrations shifted. Plants ripened at different times. Rivers changed with the seasons. Success came from flexibility rather than relying on one dependable resource. You notice that the group quietly divides into smaller teams. Not everyone goes hunting. Several people carry woven bags for gathering plants. Two older women head toward a hillside where edible roots have been found before. A few children accompany them, eager to learn the landscape a little better with each passing season. Meanwhile, a handful of experienced hunters begin preparing their spears. The contrast is striking. Neither task seems more important than the other. Both are essential. Modern stories often celebrate dramatic hunts, but daily survival usually depended on many smaller efforts working together. You choose to follow the gathering group first. The path winds through patches of low shrubs filled with berries that have just reached perfect ripeness. The sweet scent drifts through the cool morning air. One woman carefully examines every cluster before picking it. Only the ripest fruit goes into the basket. The greener berries are left behind. Patience today means more food tomorrow. Nearby, another person kneels beside broad leafy plants growing close to the river. With a sharpened digging stick, she loosens the soil around thick underground roots. The earth feels cool and slightly damp beneath your fingers as you help lift one free. Its rough surface is covered in tiny hairs and clumps of dark soil. It hardly looks impressive, yet after roasting beside the fire, it will become an important source of nourishment. Evidence from preserved plant remains and microscopic traces found on ancient tools shows that prehistoric people gathered a remarkable variety of wild foods, including roots, tubers, seeds, nuts, berries, fruits, mushrooms, and leafy plants. Their diets often changed with the seasons and with the environments they inhabited. One fascinating detail is that some ancient grinding stones still contain microscopic grains of starch trapped within tiny cracks. These invisible traces have helped archaeologists identify plant foods that disappeared thousands of years ago. The landscape quietly keeps its memories. By late morning, you leave the gatherers and walk toward the hunters waiting near a gentle rise overlooking the valley. Nobody is chasing animals, nobody is shouting, everyone's watching. Far below, several deer graze peacefully along the edge of the forest. The wind blows toward the people rather than toward the animals. That matters. A deer can detect unfamiliar scents from surprising distances. One hunter kneels and pinches a few dry blades of grass between his fingers. He releases them. The tiny strands drift slowly across the hillside. The wind has remained steady, satisfied. He nods quietly. You begin realizing that successful hunting often involves waiting much longer than moving. The group slowly circles through taller grass, remaining hidden whenever possible. Each footstep is careful, dry branches are avoided. Loose stones are stepped around rather than upon. The pace is almost unbelievably slow. It reminds you that silence can be as valuable as speed. Eventually the hunters reach a cluster of bushes overlooking a narrow path leading toward the river. The deer use this route regularly. How do they know? Because generations have watched. Animals are creatures of habit. People learn those habits by observing season after season, year after year. Excavated hunting sites reveal that prehistoric communities often understood migration routes and predictable animal behavior with remarkable precision. This deep familiarity allowed them to position themselves where opportunities were most likely to appear. Exactly how much planning took place before individual hunts remains an active area of research. Some experts believe many expeditions were carefully organized days in advance, while others suggest experienced hunters adjusted their plans continually as conditions changed. The deer gradually approach. No one moves. Even your breathing becomes slower. One young animal pauses to nibble fresh leaves. Another lifts its head, listening. Then, apparently satisfied, it continues walking. The hunters wait until the animals move closer. You appreciate the restraint. It would be easy to throw too early. Instead, everyone waits for the best opportunity. When movement finally comes, it is swift but controlled. Several spears leave steady hands. The moment passes almost as quickly as it began. The herd disappears into the trees. Silence returns. There is no celebration, only quiet gratitude. Food has been secured. Every useful part of the animal will serve a purpose. Meat provides nourishment. Hide becomes clothing. Bones become tools. Sinew becomes thread. Nothing is casually discarded. The journey back to camp feels peaceful along the way. Several people collect edible herbs growing beside sunlit rocks. Even after a successful hunt, gathering continues. Nature rarely rewards wastefulness. Back at the riverside camp. Preparations begin for the evening meal. Thin strips of meat are carefully sliced using sharp flint blades. Some will be cooked immediately. Others are placed near gentle smoke to help preserve them for future days. The aroma slowly fills the camp. It mingles with roasting roots, fresh herbs, and the familiar scent of burning wood. Children help arrange smooth stones around the fire. An elder shows them how to turn pieces of meat so they cook evenly. No lesson is announced. Learning simply happens while everyone works together. Nearby, Another family cracks open hard nuts using rounded stones gathered from the riverbank. The shells split with satisfying little sounds. Inside waits food that can last much longer than fresh berries. Planning ahead is woven into nearly every activity. One charming glimpse into daily life comes from ancient sites where caches of nuts and other gathered foods have been discovered stored in sheltered places, suggesting that some communities prepared carefully for seasons when fresh resources became scarce. As afternoon fades into evening, soft golden light spreads across the valley. Birds settle into the trees. The river reflects the changing colours of the sky. You sit beside the fire holding a warm roasted root in your hands. Its earthy sweetness blends surprisingly well with the freshly cooked meat. The meal is simple, yet every bite carries the work of many people. Trackers, gatherers, hunters, toolmakers, firekeepers, children learning, elders remembering. You begin to see that survival before civilization was never the achievement of one extraordinary individual. It belonged to the entire community. The day's success rested upon countless small acts of cooperation that often passed unnoticed. As darkness settles gently across the riverside camp, familiar stars begin appearing overhead once again. The fire crackles softly beside you, sending glowing sparks into the cool evening air. Somewhere across the valley, distant animals continue their own quiet journeys through the night, while you rest comfortably among people who have learned that living well in this ancient world means respecting every season, every landscape, and every gift nature chooses to offer. The evening fades so gently into night that you hardly notice the moment when the last colours disappear from the western sky. One by one, the stars return above the river valley, until the heavens seem almost crowded with light. The fire burns steadily in the centre of the camp, its warm glow reaching only a short distance before giving way to soft darkness. Beyond that circle of light, the land settles into quiet sounds. You hear insects singing among the grasses, the steady murmur of flowing water, and the occasional rustle of leaves as a light breeze wanders through the trees. You sit close enough to the fire to feel its warmth on your hands. Across from you, a small child has already fallen asleep, wrapped snugly in a soft animal skin. An older sibling gently adjusts the covering without being asked. The gesture is simple, it lasts only a moment, yet it speaks volumes about how life works here. No one survives entirely alone as the flames dance before you. You begin to notice something that has been quietly present throughout your journey. This community is built around relationships. The tools matter, the food matters, the shelters matter, but people matter most. Archaeological discoveries suggest that Upper Paleolithic groups generally lived in relatively small bands, often made up of extended families and close companions, although the exact size varied depending on the landscape and available resources. Many researchers estimate that these groups may have included a few dozen individuals who depended heavily upon one another. The number itself is interesting. What matters more is what those people shared: work, knowledge, responsibility, comfort, laughter, even silence. Morning arrives after a peaceful night. Sunlight filters gently through the trees, warming the entrance of the camp little by little. The smell of the last night's fire still lingers in the air, mixing with fresh grass and the faint sweetness of nearby flowering plants. You notice that everyone seems to know what to do and no one waits for instructions. One person begins preparing breakfast, another checks the drying meat hanging near yesterday's fire. Someone else walks toward the river carrying empty skin containers. The children wake gradually, rubbing sleepy eyes before joining the quiet rhythm of the morning. Tasks appear almost effortless because they have become familiar through repetition. No written schedules exist. No bells announce the beginning of work. The day unfolds naturally. You walk beside one of the elders as several young children gather around. Today's lesson begins with stones, not just any stones. The elder places 3 different pieces upon the ground. One breaks cleanly, one crumbles, One remains stubbornly dull, without saying very much. The elder demonstrates how each behaves when struck. The children lean closer, they touch the surfaces, they ask simple questions, then they try for themselves. Learning comes through hands as much as through words. You smile as one little girl proudly produces a tiny flake after several careful attempts. It is hardly useful as a tool, yet everyone nearby seems genuinely pleased. Small successes deserve encouragement. Evidence from prehistoric camps indicates that children likely participated in daily activities from an early age, gradually learning practical skills through observation and supervised practice rather than being separated from adult work. Watching this process unfold feels surprisingly familiar. Modern classrooms may look different. The desire to teach the next generation certainly does not. Later in the morning, you accompany several women preparing animal hides. The skins have already been cleaned. Now they are stretched tightly across simple wooden frames. One woman uses a stone scraper with steady, practiced movements. The sound is soft, scrape, pause, scrape. The rhythm becomes almost soothing. You run your fingers gently across one finished section. The leather feels smooth and flexible, very different from the stiff hide that first came from the animal. Nearby, another person rubs softened animal fat into the surface. This helps keep the leather supple and resistant to moisture. Making clothing requires patience. One fascinating discovery from Ice Age archaeological sites is the presence of specialized hide working tools that became polished through years of repeated use. Even today, microscopic wear patterns allow scientists to identify which tools scraped leather, carved wood, or worked bone. Tiny marks preserve enormous stories. By midday, children gather beneath the shade of several trees while an elder begins telling a story. You cannot understand every word. Language itself is still evolving across countless generations and regions, yet expressions, gestures, and familiar rhythms carry much of the meaning. The children listen quietly. Occasionally they laugh. Sometimes they look toward the surrounding hills as though imagining the places being described. Perhaps the story explains where certain animals travel each season. Perhaps it reminds listeners about dangerous rivers. Perhaps it celebrates an ancestor remembered for remarkable wisdom. Or perhaps it simply entertains after a busy morning. The exact content remains unknown, yet storytelling almost certainly played an important role long before writing appeared. Many anthropologists believe oral traditions helped preserve practical survival knowledge as well as shared identity, values, and memories across generations. Exactly how structured these early stories became cannot be determined with certainty, but few doubt their importance within close communities. As the afternoon grows warmer, you watch teenagers practicing with spears beyond the camp. Unlike the younger children, their movements have become more confident. They throw toward the bundles of reeds tied together at varying distances. Each throw receives calm advice rather than criticism. An older hunter quietly demonstrates better balance. Another suggests waiting a fraction longer before releasing the spear. Nobody appears embarrassed by mistakes. Improvement matters more than perfection. Nearby, two older women collect medicinal plants growing along the riverbank. They pause often, discussing leaves, stems, and roots. Some plants will become food. Others may help soothe aching muscles or clean small wounds. Many ancient communities possessed an impressive understanding of their local environments, gradually discovering which natural materials could ease discomfort or support healing. One subtle clue comes from archaeological studies showing repeated collection of particular plant species at certain sites, suggesting these plants held lasting value beyond ordinary meals. Nature served as both pantry and pharmacy. Clouds drift slowly overhead during the late afternoon. The light becomes softer. Children begin inventing simple games using smooth stones collected from the river. One arranges them into neat circles. Another carefully sacks them into the tiny towers before laughing as they tumble apart. Play has its own purpose. It strengthens coordination, encourages imagination, builds friendships. Even in a demanding world, moments of joy find room to grow. As evening approaches, families gather once more around the familiar fire. Someone begins repairing a woven carrying bag. Another sharpens a scraper dulled during hide preparation. The youngest children lean comfortably against their parents, slowly growing sleepy as the warm light flickers across familiar faces. The smell of roasting fish joins the fragrance of burning wood. Its rich aroma drifts gently through the camp. Dinner tonight comes from the nearby river rather than the open plains. Flexibility remains one of humanity's greatest strengths. You notice an elderly man sitting quietly near the edge of the firelight. His hands no longer shape stone as quickly as they once did. He no longer walks the longest hunting journeys, yet everyone still seeks his advice. Experience has its own value. Older members of prehistoric communities likely contributed through memory, teaching, planning, childcare, tool repair, and many other responsibilities that required knowledge rather than physical strength alone. As darkness slowly settles over the valley once again, the camp grows quieter, children drift into sleep, conversations become softer. The fire continues its gentle crackling beneath a sky overflowing with stars. You realize that this small gathering beside the river is more than a temporary camp. It is a place where skills are shared without keeping score, where every generation quietly prepares the next, where survival depends not only upon finding food or making tools, but upon kindness, patience, and the willingness to care for one another. Wrapped in the warmth of the fire and surrounded by the peaceful sounds of a world long before cities, you feel the quiet strength of a family shaped by cooperation. It is this invisible bond, passed from one generation to the next. That may have been one of humanity's greatest achievements long before the first civilization ever rose. Several weeks have quietly passed since you first arrived in this ancient world. The days have grown shorter without announcing the change. Sunrise comes a little later, evening arrives a little sooner. The warm afternoons that once lingered across the valley now slip away more quickly, replaced by cool air that settles over the grass before the stars appear. You step outside the shelter just before dawn, as ground feels crisp beneath your feet. A thin layer of frost sparkles across the meadow, turning every blade of grass into a tiny silver thread. Your breath hangs in front of you for a moment before disappearing into the still morning. Winter has not yet arrived, but everyone knows it is coming. The changing seasons shaped nearly every decision made by Upper Paleolithic communities. Long before calendars existed, people read the landscape itself, the colour of leaves, the direction of migrating birds, the thickness of animal coats. And the first morning frosts all served as reliable signs that colder months were approaching. The camp feels different today. There is no fear, only preparation. One person checks the bundles of dried meat suspended above gentle smoke. Another carefully folds finished animal skins that will soon become heavier winter coverings. Several people inspect the shelter, replacing worn bindings that held together the wooden frame. Tiny repairs made now could prevent much larger problems later. You find yourself helping gather fresh branches from nearby shrubs. The branches are woven into the outer walls of the shelter before additional hides are fastened over them. Cold winds are remarkably patient. They always find the smallest opening. You run your hand along one finished section. The layered hides feel thick and surprisingly warm. A slight smell of smoke clings to them from weeks spent near the fire. It is a comforting scent now, one that immediately reminds you of safety. The fire burns steadily while people work. Nobody allows it to grow too large. Fuel must be used wisely. Every piece of dry wood gathered today will become valuable during the long nights ahead. Today many homes stay warm with little effort beyond adjusting a thermostat. In this Ice Age landscape, warmth begins weeks before winter actually arrives. It begins with planning. You join a small group heading toward the forest. The air beneath the trees feels colder than the open grassland. Sunlight filters through branches that are slowly losing their leaves. Each gust of wind sends a few more drifting toward the forest floor. The smell here is rich and earthy, damp moss, fallen needles, fresh bark. Everything carries the quiet fragrance of autumn. The group searches carefully for standing dead trees. These are dry enough to burn well while still solid enough to provide useful firewood. Fresh green wood is mostly ignored. It contains too much moisture. You help carry armfuls of branches back toward camp. The weight is noticeable but comfortable. The repeated trips gradually create neat stacks beside the shelter. No one says exactly how much wood will be enough. Enough is simply reached through experience. Excavated prehistoric camps often contain evidence of repeated hearth use, along with large quantities of charcoal and burned wood. Reflecting the central importance of fire throughout cold seasons, one particularly interesting observation comes from caves where generations return to the same hearth location. Layer upon layer of ash accumulated over centuries, creating a remarkable record of repeated human occupation. A single fireplace could quietly witness countless lifetimes. As midday approaches, another task begins. Several hunters examine clothing worn during previous winters. Loose stitching is repaired using bone needles. New strips of fur are added where old ones have thinned. The work is careful. Nobody waits until clothing fails. You sit beside an older woman as she threads sinew through the eye of a polished bone needle. Her hands move with remarkable steadiness despite her age. She notices a small tear near the shoulder of a heavy cloak. Within minutes it has disappeared beneath neat rows of stitches. You gently touch the finished seam. It is almost impossible to find. Well-fitted clothing represented one of humanity's greatest advantages during the Ice Age. Carefully sewn garments trapped warm air close to the body and allowed people to survive in environments that would otherwise have been dangerously cold. Exactly how many layers people commonly wore remains uncertain because organic materials rarely survive for tens of thousands of years. Researchers combine archaeological discoveries with studies of traditional cold-weather societies to build the clearest possible picture. By afternoon, the camp becomes pleasantly busy. Children gather dry grasses that will help start tomorrow's fires. Teenagers scrape remaining fat from several hides before they are stored. Older adults sort bundles of gathered roots, separating those ready to eat from those intended for later weeks. Nothing feels wasted. Nothing feels hurried. Preparation itself becomes part of daily life. You walk toward the nearby river. The water moves more slowly now. Thin sheets of ice have begun forming along the quiet edges where the current barely stirs. Several ducks rest on the opposite bank before lifting gracefully into the afternoon sky. The sound of their wings fades into the distance. You pause for a moment. The landscape seems to be taking one long, slow breath before winter settles over everything. Not all animals remain. Many have already begun moving south or toward lower valleys. Others grow thicker coats and continue searching for food beneath frost-covered grasses. The people notice every change. Animal behavior often provided valuable clues about approaching weather. Watching migration patterns, breeding cycles, and seasonal movements helped ancient communities anticipate environmental changes long before modern forecasting existed. Back at camp, a pleasant aroma fills the air. Someone has begun slowly roasting nuts collected earlier in the season. The warm scent blends with wood smoke and simmering roots. Simple meals become especially satisfying as temperatures continue falling. One delightful detail preserved through archaeology is the discovery of storage pits at some prehistoric sites, carefully dug into the ground and sometimes lined with natural materials. These pits may have helped protect valuable food supplies from changing weather and hungry animals. Whether every community used them regularly depended greatly upon local conditions and available resources. As evening approaches, the youngest children gather close to the fire. One little boy stretches his hands toward the warmth before smiling as the heat reaches his fingers. His grandmother quietly wraps another animal's skin around his shoulders. No words are needed. The gesture says everything. Nearby, several hunters inspect their spears. Stone points are checked carefully. Wooden shafts are examined for tiny cracks. Winter leaves little room for broken equipment. Every tool deserves attention before it becomes urgently needed. The first stars begin appearing above the darkening valley. Cold air settles gently around the camp, yet the fire creates a welcoming circle of warmth. Its light flickers across familiar faces that have worked together through another changing season. You begin realizing that preparing for winter is not one enormous task completed in a single day. It is hundreds of quiet decisions made over many weeks, repairing one cloak, drying one bundle of meat, gathering one more armful of firewood, teaching one more child how to recognize weather signs. The future is built little by little. As night fully embraces the valley, the wind whispers softly beyond the shelter walls, carrying with it the promise of colder days ahead. Inside, the fire continues its patient crackling while everyone settles beneath warm animal skins, surrounded by careful planning, shared knowledge, and steady companionship. You discover that surviving an Ice Age winter begins long before the first snowfall ever touches the ground. The first true snowfall arrives during the night. You notice it before you even open your eyes. The world sounds different. Snow has a quiet way of softening every familiar noise. The wind seems gentler. The river becomes more distant. Even the crackling fire inside the shelter feels warmer against the peaceful silence outside. You slowly sit up beneath your thick animal skin covering. The fire still glows in the center of the shelter. Someone has already added fresh wood, and thin ribbons of fragrant smoke rise toward the opening above. The comforting smell of burning pine mixes with roasted roots left warming near the embers. You step outside, the valley has changed. A smooth blanket of fresh snow stretches across the grasslands, covering yesterday's footprints and smoothing the rough edges of the landscape. The morning sun has only begun to rise, sending pale golden light across the white ground. Every tree branch carries a delicate layer of snow that sparkles softly whenever a breeze passes through. It's breathtaking. It is also demanding. Winter transforms opportunity as much as difficulty. During colder months, people adjusted nearly every part of daily life. Hunting routes changed, animals gathered in different places, travel became slower. Fires consumed more fuel. Clothing required additional layers. Success depended on adapting rather than resisting the season. You pull your fur, covering a little tighter around your shoulders. The cold presses gently against your face. It is not unbearable, not with preparation. Several hunters gather near the edge of the camp. Fresh snow creates a remarkable advantage. Every track stands out clearly. You decide to follow. The group moves through the silent landscape at an unhurried pace. Snow crunches softly beneath every careful step. The sound becomes almost rhythmic. Crunch, pause, crunch, pause. Nobody speaks. There is no need. The forest ahead seems almost asleep beneath its white covering. Then one hunter kneels. You join the circle. Pressed into the snow is a line of fresh footprints, not deer, not reindeer, much larger, rounded, deep. The elder studies them quietly before tracing one edge with a gloved finger. Bison. A small herd passed this way not long ago. Fresh snowfall often made tracking easier by preserving clear impressions of passing animals. Skilled hunters could estimate direction, group size, walking speed, and even moments when animals had stopped to feed. To you, they look like footprints to experienced eyes. They describe an entire morning. The trail continues toward a stand of tall pines. As you walk, more signs appear, broken twigs, small patches where snow has been brushed aside while animals searched for buried grasses, dark droppings that remain unfrozen. Every clue confirms the same story. The herd is nearby, yet nobody rushes forward. The hunters remain patient. Winter rewards calm decisions. The group eventually reaches a gentle rise overlooking a sheltered valley. There they stop. Below, several bison stand quietly, using their broad heads to push away snow and uncover dried grasses hidden beneath. Steam rises gently from their warm bodies into the cold air. The sight feels peaceful. You watch for several minutes. One young calf remains close to its mother. Older animals position themselves around the edges of the group. They too understand winter. They protect one another. The hunters continue observing, no movement yet, just watching. Modern life often encourages immediate action. This ancient world teaches the opposite lesson. Sometimes the wisest decision is to wait. Nearby, another set of tracks catches your attention. These are smaller, more delicate. A hunter smiles faintly. Arctic fox. The little animal has crossed the valley sometime before sunrise. Its tiny footprints weave between bushes before disappearing beneath fallen branches. One delightful detail preserved in Ice Age archaeology is that people occasionally use the soft fur of smaller animals, including foxes and hares, to add warmth and comfort to clothing or bedding. Even modest creatures contributed to surviving long winters. The morning slowly gives way to afternoon. The hunters eventually choose another route rather than approaching the bison immediately. Conditions are not quite right. Perhaps the wind has shifted. Perhaps the animals remain too alert. Nobody complains. There will be another opportunity. Choosing not to hunt can sometimes be the most successful decision. Back at camp, life continues with equal purpose. Children gather inside the shelter while snowflakes drift lazily outside once again. An elder spreads several animal hides across the floor. Today brings a different kind of lesson. You sit among the children as the elder places two carefully shaped stone points beside one another. They look similar, very similar. Then the elder turns them toward the light. Tiny differences become visible. One edge is slightly thicker. One tip is narrower. The children examine each one closely, without realizing it. They are learning how subtle changes affect strength, balance, and usefulness. Knowledge grows one observation at a time. Not every lesson takes place outdoors. The afternoon becomes wonderfully peaceful. Several adults continue sewing winter clothing. Others repair carrying bags or reshape worn wooden handles. The steady sounds of scraping, stitching, and gentle conversation blend with the crackling fire. You find yourself relaxing into the rhythm. Outside, snow continues falling. Inside, warmth quietly surrounds everyone. Around this time in human history, another group of people also lived across parts of Europe and Western Asia. Neanderthals. For many thousands of years, they survived challenging Ice Age environments using impressive hunting skills, carefully made stone tools, and deep knowledge of their landscapes. They occupied caves, built shelters, controlled fire, and cared for members of their communities. Their story unfolded alongside that of early modern humans for thousands of years. Exactly how often these groups met remains one of archaeology's most fascinating questions. Some evidence suggests periods of contact, cultural exchange, and even shared technologies in certain regions. Genetic studies have also shown that many people living today carry a small percentage of Neanderthal DNA, revealing that these populations occasionally formed families together. Other aspects of their relationship remain far less certain. New discoveries continue refining our understanding as fresh archaeological sites are uncovered across Europe and Asia. You imagine those distant encounters. Perhaps two small groups noticed smoke rising beyond a snowy valley. Perhaps they observed one another from opposite hillsides. Perhaps they exchanged cautious glances before continuing on separate journeys. Whatever happened, these meetings took place in landscapes much like the one surrounding you now. As evening approaches, The snowfall finally begins to ease, clouds thin just enough for the first stars to appear overhead. The white ground reflects faint starlight, making the valley glow softly even after sunset. Dinner tonight is simple: warm broth, roasted meat, stored roots. Everyone eats slowly, enjoying the comforting warmth after a long cold day. The fire becomes the centre of the evening once again. Children grow sleepy while listening to gentle conversations. Older members of the group quietly discuss tomorrow's plans. Outside, somewhere beyond the circle of light, wolves call across the frozen valley. Their voices drift through the still night before fading into silence. Nobody seems alarmed. They have heard these sounds many times before. The wolves have their own families, their own journeys, their own struggle to survive winter. You sit beside the glowing embers and reflect on the quiet wisdom surrounding you. Winter has not made people stronger by force alone. It has encouraged patience, observation, preparation, cooperation, the very qualities that have guided your journey since the first evening beside the cave fire. As the flames settle into a gentle glow and fresh snow continues reflecting the starlight beyond the shelter, you feel connected not only to the people around you, but also to distant human relatives who once shared this vast Ice Age world. Though separated by landscapes, traditions, and countless untold stories, they all face the same quiet challenge of finding warmth, food, and hope beneath the endless winter sky. Winter slowly loosens its grip. You do not notice the change all at once. Instead, it arrives through 100 small signs scattered across the landscape. The afternoons stretch a little longer. The snow beneath the trees begins to soften. Tiny streams that disappeared beneath ice now whisper quietly through the valley once again. You step outside just after sunrise. The cold still greets you, but it no longer bites with the same determination. A gentle breeze carries the scent of melting snow, damp soil, and fresh pine somewhere high above. A flock of birds crosses the brightening sky, their calls drifting down through the clear morning air. The camp feels hopeful. Children splash through shallow puddles forming near the riverbank. Adults smile as they inspect patches of grass beginning to emerge from beneath the snow. Another season is beginning. With it comes another journey. Human history is, in many ways, a history of movement, long before cities, borders, or roads existed. Small groups of people gradually explored new valleys, crossed mountain passes, followed coastlines, and entered unfamiliar lands. These movements did not happen in a single great expedition. They unfolded over thousands of years, one careful step at a time. You begin helping prepare the camp for travel. Animal skins are folded neatly. Stone tools are wrapped inside leather pouches. Bundles of dried food are divided among several people so no single traveller carries too much weight. The fire is treated with special care. A small container filled with slow-burning embers is prepared for the journey ahead. The flames themselves will stay behind. Their warmth will travel with you in another form. As everyone finishes packing, you look back across the valley. Only a few weeks ago it seemed like the centre of the world. Now it becomes another memory. Perhaps your group will return next year. Perhaps changing weather will guide you elsewhere. The landscape is familiar, yet it never remains exactly the same. You begin walking shortly after sunrise. The ground feels soft beneath your feet where snow has already melted. Tiny flowers push through damp earth, bringing unexpected splashes of colour after the long white winter. The air smells wonderfully alive. Fresh moss, young leaves, flowing water. Every breath reminds you that spring has arrived. The route follows a broad river flowing toward distant hills. Rivers are more than beautiful features of the landscape. They provide fresh water, attract animals, offer fish throughout much of the year, and naturally guide travellers through unfamiliar country. Many prehistoric journeys probably followed waterways for exactly these reasons. You pause beside a bend in the river where several people kneel to drink. The water is cold enough to numb your fingertips. Smooth stones shine beneath the clear current. Small fish dart between patches of waving plants. Everything feels calm. As the morning continues, the valley gradually changes. Dense forests give way to rolling grasslands. Tall cliffs appear in the distance. Beyond them lie places no one in your immediate group has visited for many years. Not because they are forbidden, simply because people cannot be everywhere at once. You begin wondering what waits beyond the next ridge. Perhaps another river, perhaps open plains, perhaps another community following its own seasonal journey. Archaeological discoveries show that Upper Paleolithic people expanded into a remarkable variety of environments. Over many generations they adapted to forests, tundra, mountains, coastlines, and open grasslands. Their ability to adjust to changing conditions became one of humanity's defining strengths. Around midday, the group stops beneath a cluster of birch trees. Their white trunks glow softly in the sunlight. Fresh green leaves flutter gently overhead. Lunch is quiet and satisfying. Dried meat, roasted roots saved from winter stores, fresh herbs gathered during the morning walk. Simple meals seem especially welcome after several hours of steady travel, while everyone rests. One of the older hunters studies a distant hillside. At first you see nothing unusual. Then movement catches your eye. Several wild horses graze peacefully near the crest. The elder smiles, not because hunting is planned, simply because healthy animals suggest healthy grasslands. Healthy grasslands often mean reliable water nearby. Nature leaves clues everywhere. One remarkable detail comes from archaeological sites where ancient camps were repeatedly established near natural springs. These dependable water sources attracted both wildlife and people, making them valuable places to revisit across many generations. After the short break, the journey continues. Clouds drift lazily across the afternoon sky. The temperature becomes pleasantly warm. Children begin collecting interesting stones from the path. Some are unusually smooth. Others sparkle with tiny crystals. One little girl proudly carries a stone shaped almost like a bird's egg. No one tells her to throw it away. Sometimes beautiful objects deserve a place in the journey, even if they serve no practical purpose. By late afternoon, the group reaches a wide meadow surrounded by scattered trees. Fresh tracks cover the soft ground. Deer, wild horses, small foxes, countless birds. The meadow seems full of quiet life. The hunters spread out slowly, not searching for immediate prey but learning the landscape. Where do animals enter? Where do they leave? Which plants grow here? Where does the wind usually travel? Every new place begins with careful observation. You realize that exploring unknown land is less about courage than curiosity. People who rushed blindly often paid a heavy price. People who watched patiently usually understood much more. Nearby, several children discover a fallen tree crossing a narrow stream. One after another, they balance carefully across it while laughing softly. The adults allow them their fun but remain watchful. Even ordinary moments become opportunities to build confidence. As evening approaches, the group decides this meadow will become tonight's camp. Temporary shelters begin appearing with familiar efficiency. Wooden poles are gathered. Animal skins are stretched across simple frames. Firewood is collected before darkness arrives. Everyone already knows the routine. Watching the camp come together feels like watching birds build a nest. Every movement seems natural. Evidence from prehistoric campsites reveals that many temporary settlements were organized thoughtfully rather than randomly. Hearths, sleeping areas, tool-making spaces, and food preparation zones often occupied consistent locations, suggesting people valued order even during brief stays. Exactly how much these layouts reflected tradition or simple practicality remains difficult to determine. Different communities almost certainly developed their own habits over countless generations. The evening meal cooks slowly above glowing coals. Smoke rises straight into the calm sky. The scent of roasting meat mingles with fresh spring air. Nearby, someone quietly repairs a carrying strap worn thin during the day's walk. Another sharpens a stone blade that has become slightly dull. Preparation never truly ends. It simply changes with each new landscape. Night settles gently over the meadow. The stars return one by one, until the sky once again becomes a great river of light. You lie comfortably beside the fire, listening to frogs calling from nearby pools and the distant hoot of an owl hidden among the trees. The sounds feel unfamiliar, yet already they are becoming part of home. You think about the generations who slowly crossed mountains, valleys, and rivers long before maps existed. They carried no written directions, no compasses, no certainty about what waited beyond the horizon. They carried something quieter: curiosity, patience. The confidence that careful observation could turn unfamiliar land into familiar ground. As the fire settles into glowing embers and the gentle sounds of spring surround your new camp, you realize that every great human migration began with ordinary evenings like this one. A family resting after a long day's walk, sharing simple food beneath the stars, preparing to greet another unknown horizon when the morning light returned. Morning arrives with the gentle murmur of a stream winding through the meadow beside your temporary camp. The air is fresh with the scent of damp grass and young leaves still carrying drops of dew. A robin lands on a low branch not far away, tilts its head as if inspecting the camp, then bursts into song before disappearing into the forest. The melody is simple, but it seems to welcome another peaceful day in this ancient landscape. The fire has already been coaxed back to life. Thin curls of smoke drift upward through the cool air, carrying the comforting fragrance of pine and dry willow. Someone quietly stirs a pot of warming roots while another slices yesterday's smoked meat into thin strips. The movements are familiar now. No one gives orders. Everyone notices what needs doing. You realize that this quiet cooperation depends on something deeper than routine. It depends on communication. Not only words, expressions, gestures, shared memories, careful observation, even silence. You finish breakfast and join a small group preparing to walk toward a rocky hillside overlooking the valley. The climb is gentle, and each step carries you through patches of wildflowers that have opened since yesterday. Bees drift lazily from blossom to blossom, completely uninterested in the people passing nearby from the top of the hill. The view stretches for miles. The river curves through green grasslands before disappearing into distant forests. Beyond them, pale mountains rise against the clear blue sky. You notice several columns of birds circling high above a far valley. One hunter watches them carefully. He raises an arm and points. No words. Everyone understands. Birds often gather where animals are feeding or where water remains plentiful. A simple gesture has shared valuable information with the entire group. You begin thinking about how many conversations happen without speaking at all. A raised hand, a nod, a glance toward the wind, a finger resting quietly against the lips. Each movement carries meaning. Long before writing appeared, human communities developed increasingly sophisticated ways of sharing information. Spoken language almost certainly played a central role, though gestures, facial expressions, and shared experience remained equally important parts of everyday communication. Exactly when fully modern language emerged remains difficult to determine. Speech leaves no fossils behind. Instead, scientists study anatomy, genetics, archaeology, and comparisons with living languages, gradually building a picture that grows richer with every new discovery. As you continue walking, the path narrows between clusters of weathered limestone. One child suddenly crouches and points toward the ground. Everyone stops. Hidden among patches of moss is a small snake warming itself in the morning sun. The child quietly steps back. The adults smile. No panic, No loud warnings, just calm awareness. You suspect this lesson has been taught many times before. The group simply walks around the little visitor, leaving it undisturbed. Communication is not always about speaking. Sometimes it is about noticing. The hillside eventually opens into a broad rocky shelter. Unlike the cave where your journey began, this place is shallow and filled with sunlight. The stone walls glow softly in shades of grey and pale gold. Several people begin unpacking small leather pouches. Inside are pieces of red ochre, black charcoal, and yellow mineral pigments collected during earlier travels. You watch as one woman grinds a piece of red ochre against a flat stone. The powder gathers slowly. She mixes it with a small amount of animal fat until it becomes a smooth paste. The colour is astonishingly rich, almost glowing, across Europe, Australia, Africa, and parts of Asia. Ancient people repeatedly collected mineral pigments, sometimes transporting them across considerable distances. The effort involved suggests these colours held lasting importance beyond simple decoration. No one can say with complete confidence exactly what every painted mark meant. Some may have carried symbolic meaning. Others may have marked important places or memorable events. Still others may have reflected simple enjoyment of creating something beautiful. The evidence leaves room for several possibilities. You notice that today's painting is surprisingly modest. No great mural appears. Instead, a few careful handprints are pressed against the stone. Simple lines follow. Small dots, gentle curves. The work unfolds quietly, almost meditatively. Children are invited to watch but not interfere. One little girl studies every movement with complete concentration. Perhaps one day she will make her own marks. Perhaps she already imagines them. An unexpected discovery made at several prehistoric sites is that children also seem to have participated in creating cave art. Tiny handprints and footprints preserved in soft clay suggest that artistic spaces were not reserved only for adults. The thought makes you smile. Creativity belongs to every generation. As midday approaches, the group leaves the shelter and continues toward the river. Along the way, two teenagers begin practicing silent communication. One points toward imaginary animals, the other responds with different hand signals. Sometimes they laugh quietly after misunderstanding one another. Then they try again. Learning continues through play. Nearby, an elder demonstrates how different bird calls can imitate sounds found in nature. The calls are remarkably convincing. A curious crow even answers from a nearby tree before realizing something unusual is happening. Everyone chuckles softly. The forest feels a little friendlier afterward. You wonder how often voices were used to imitate animals during hunting, or simply to entertain children around evening fires. The answer remains hidden, somewhere in the distant past. By afternoon, the weather grows pleasantly warm. The group stops beside a quiet pool where clear water reflects drifting clouds. Several people refill skin containers. Others gather reeds that will later become baskets. Children search for smooth stones perfect for skipping across the surface. You join them. Your first attempt sinks immediately. The second bounces twice. The third travels farther than expected, leaving a cheerful chain of ripples behind, even thousands of years ago. People surely appreciated moments with no purpose beyond simple enjoyment. Excavated camps occasionally reveal objects showing little sign of practical use. Carefully carved pieces of ivory, polished stones, and decorative items remind us that curiosity and creativity have always been part of being human. Late in the afternoon, dark clouds briefly gather over the distant hills. The oldest members of the group exchange quiet glances. They notice subtle changes you would probably miss. The wind shifts. Swallows begin flying lower across the meadow. The smell of rain arrives before the first drop. Within minutes, everyone calmly prepares. Bundles are covered, tools are gathered. The brief shower passes almost as quickly as it arrived. Soon sunlight returns, filling the valley with the fresh scent of wet grass. tiny droplets sparkle on every leaf. Children step carefully around puddles before eventually giving up and splashing through them anyway. Some things never change. As evening settles over the camp, the fire becomes the center of attention once more. Dinner cooks slowly while people exchange stories from earlier journeys. You cannot understand every word, yet the rhythm feels comforting. Faces brighten. Hands move as people describe rivers, animals, changing seasons, and familiar places visited long ago. Memory travels from one generation to the next without needing ink or paper. You realize that every story told beside this fire is another bridge across time. Each child listening tonight will carry pieces of these memories into adulthood. Years from now, they will share them with children not yet born. Knowledge survives because people care enough to pass it forward. The stars begin appearing overhead. The meadow grows quiet except for insects singing beyond the firelight. Warm smoke drifts gently upward, disappearing into the immense night sky. You settle comfortably beneath your fur covering and listen to the soft voices continuing nearby. In this peaceful world before books and libraries, the greatest archive is the human mind, strengthened by careful listening, thoughtful observation, and stories repeated with love beside countless evening fires. The next morning begins beneath a sky washed clean by the light rain that passed during the night. The air feels fresh enough that every breath seems to clear your thoughts. Gentle sunlight slips between the branches, painting shifting patterns across the ground as leaves sway in the breeze. Somewhere upstream, you hear the steady splash of a fish breaking the surface before the river returns to its quiet rhythm. You step away from the camp while most people are still finishing breakfast. The grass brushes softly against your legs. Tiny spiders have stretched delicate webs between the stems, each one sparkling with beads of dew. They look almost too perfect to disturb, so you carefully walk around them. Even in this ancient world, beauty appears in the smallest places. As you reach a rocky ridge overlooking the valley, you pause. The view has become familiar over the past weeks, yet it still captures your attention. Forests spread across the lower slopes. Open grasslands ripple gently beneath the morning wind. Beyond them, distant hills fade into a soft blue haze. The landscape is generous. It offers food, shelter, stone, wood, water, and countless lessons. It also inspires something less practical: wonder. You return to camp just as several people begin preparing for a short walk toward the limestone shelter you visited yesterday. Leather pouches containing pieces of ochre, charcoal, and smooth stones are carefully packed alongside ordinary tools. No one announces a special occasion. The journey simply feels important. As you walk, children chatter quietly among themselves. One points excitedly toward a butterfly drifting across the path. Another stops to admire a feather lying beneath an old oak tree. The feather is beautiful, instead of throwing it away after a quick glance. The child tucks it carefully into a belt made of braided leather. It serves no obvious purpose, yet somehow it feels exactly right. Human beings have always noticed beautiful things. Long before the first cities rose, people collected shells, feathers, colourful stones, and unusual animal teeth. Many of these objects travelled far from the places where they naturally occurred, suggesting they were valued for more than simple usefulness. You arrive at the shelter as sunlight pours across its broad entrance. The stone walls seem almost warm beneath the morning light. Inside, the air carries the faint scent of mineral dust mixed with cool limestone. The painted handprints you saw yesterday remain quietly on the wall. No one rushes toward them. Instead, everyone sits for a while. The silence feels respectful rather than solemn. You wonder if this place has welcomed generations before you. Perhaps grandparents once sat where you are sitting now. Perhaps children laughed in this same space thousands of evenings ago. It may never be possible to know. Still, the thought is comforting. One woman begins grinding a fresh piece of red ochre. Another crushes black charcoal into fine powder. Nearby, A young man carefully smooths the surface of a flat stone before placing small dots of pigment upon it. The preparation is almost as careful as the painting itself. Across many prehistoric sites, archaeologists have uncovered grinding stones stained with mineral pigments, along with containers that once held prepared colours. These quiet discoveries suggest that making paint was often a thoughtful process, rather than a hurried activity. You watch as an older man raises his hand toward the wall. He presses his palm gently against the stone, using a hollow bird bone. Another person blows pigment across the edges of his hand. When he steps away, a clear outline remains. The image is simple, yet it feels deeply personal, for just a moment. It seems as though someone has reached across thousands of years to greet you. You slowly place your own hand against the cool limestone. You do not leave a mark, you simply feel the texture beneath your fingertips. Rough, ancient, steady. You imagine how many hands have rested here before yours. One small clue hidden within prehistoric caves has fascinated researchers for years. Careful measurements of handprints suggest they belong to people of many different ages. Some appear to have been made by children, others by adults, reminding us that these remarkable places were shared by entire communities rather than only a select few. Outside the shelter, the forest hums softly with life. Bees drift among flowering plants. A squirrel races along the branch of a pine tree before vanishing into the canopy. The smell of sun-warmed needles fills the air. You step outside and find several children arranging colourful stones in neat circles upon the ground. No one told them to do it. The activity seems to emerge naturally. Patterns, shapes, balance. The simple pleasure of making something that did not exist a few moments before. Perhaps creativity begins exactly like this, not through grand ambition, but through quiet curiosity. By midday, everyone gathers beneath the shade of tall trees overlooking the valley. Lunch is modest: fresh berries, roasted roots, smoked fish from yesterday's catch, a handful of nuts saved from earlier travels. As people eat, conversations drift gently between practical matters and stories remembered from older journeys. Someone points towards distant cliffs where rare stone can sometimes be found. Another recalls a valley filled with flowering plants during early summer. Memories become maps, stories become guides. No written records are needed. The afternoon brings a pleasant surprise. A small herd of deer appears at the edge of the meadow. The animals graze peacefully, completely unaware of the quiet observers watching from beneath the trees. Nobody reaches for a spear. The camp has enough food today. Instead, everyone simply watches. A young child whispers a question. The elder beside him quietly explains something about the animal's behaviour. Perhaps he speaks about the changing seasons, perhaps about where they usually travel next, whatever the lesson. It begins with respect rather than ownership. You realise this may be one of the oldest classrooms in human history, not surrounded by walls, surrounded by life itself. As the deer disappear into the forest, you notice one little girl sketching their shapes with a charred stick upon a flat piece of bark. The drawing is wonderfully simple: 4 legs, a curved back, small antlers. She smiles proudly before showing it to her mother. The mother smiles too. No masterpiece is required, only encouragement. It is easy to imagine how careful observation of animals gradually inspired many of the paintings that still survive inside caves today. Whether every image served a practical purpose or whether some were created simply because people enjoyed making art, remains one of prehistory's enduring mysteries. The surviving paintings invite us to wonder, but they do not always reveal their full meaning. The afternoon light slowly softens into evening. Back at camp, someone strings polished animal teeth onto a leather cord nearby. Another person smooths the surface of a carved antler with fine sand gathered from the river. Neither object is essential for tomorrow's meal, yet both are crafted with remarkable care. Beauty, it seems, has found its place beside survival. The fire glows warmly as darkness settles over the meadow. Its light dances across smiling faces and carefully made ornaments resting beside everyday tools. You sit quietly, listening to laughter carried gently through the cool evening air for a while. Nobody speaks loudly, there is no need. The stars gradually appear overhead, one after another, until the sky once again becomes a vast ocean of light. You lean back against a folded animal skin and let your eyes wander upward. The same constellations shine above you that will one day guide travellers, inspire poets, and spark questions in generations yet to come. Here, long before written history begins, people are already doing something deeply human. They are creating, not because survival demands it, but because the heart quietly does. The fire crackles softly beside you as the night grows deeper. Around you rest tools shaped with skill, clothing stitched with patience, meals prepared through cooperation, and small works of beauty made simply because someone felt moved to create them. In this peaceful camp beneath an endless sky, you begin to understand that civilization did not invent creativity. It merely inherited a gift that had already been glowing beside ancient fires for countless generations. Another season quietly begins to turn. You wake before sunrise to a world wrapped in cool grey light. The camp is still, except for the gentle crackling of the fire and the soft murmur of the nearby river. A thin mist floats above the water, drifting slowly across the meadow before dissolving among the trees. The air carries the clean scent of damp soil, moss, and fresh willow leaves. You pull your fur covering around your shoulders and step outside. The grass feels cool beneath your feet. Tiny birds hop between low shrubs, searching for insects awakened by the first warmth of the morning, somewhere deep within the forest. A wood pigeon calls in slow, peaceful rhythm. Everything feels familiar, yet the landscape is changing once again. You have begun to notice that nothing in this ancient world remains exactly the same for very long. The river that seemed so calm a few weeks ago now moves a little faster. The meadow has become greener. Flowers that filled the hillsides have already begun producing seeds. Some trees carry fresh leaves while others still wake more slowly after the long winter. Nature never truly stands still. People must learn to move with it. Ancient environments changed constantly. Some shifts happened over the course of a single day through rain, wind, or sunlight. Others unfolded across years, centuries, or even thousands of years as glaciers advanced, retreated, and reshaped entire landscapes. Human communities survived because they adapted again and again, rather than expecting the world to remain predictable. You walk toward the river with several members of the group carrying woven baskets. The water reaches a little higher along the bank than it did during your last visit. Snow melting in distant mountains has quietly fed streams far upstream. The entire valley responds. You kneel beside the water. It feels icy against your fingertips. Small branches drift past, carried from forests many miles away. The river is telling a story. It speaks through movement instead of words. One older woman points towards several young trees leaning slightly downstream. They were standing straighter only a few weeks ago. Now the softened riverbank has begun wearing away beneath them. The lesson is simple. Even familiar places deserve fresh attention. You continue following the river until it bends sharply around a rocky outcrop. There, the group pauses. The ground is scattered with smooth pebbles left behind by earlier floods. Some shine white. Others glow deep red or dark grey after being washed clean by the current. Children immediately begin searching for the most interesting shapes. One proudly discovers a stone marked with natural stripes that resemble flowing water. Another finds a perfectly round pebble no larger than a walnut. Tiny discoveries bring quiet excitement. You smile as everyone admires the little treasures before returning them gently to the ground. Not every beautiful object needs to be carried away. As the morning grows warmer, birds become increasingly active. Swallows dart low across the river. A pair of cranes circles overhead before landing in a nearby marsh. Their arrival draws several smiles from the older members of the camp. Migrating birds often signaled changing seasons. Long before written calendars existed, people could watch the arrival and departure of familiar species to anticipate shifts in weather, food availability, and animal movement. These annual patterns became reliable companions. You continue into a broad woodland where sunlight filters softly through young leaves. The forest floor feels springy beneath layers of moss and old needles. Fresh mushrooms have appeared after recent rains. One man crouches beside them but does not immediately gather any. Instead, he studies each carefully. Some are useful, others are left untouched. Experience remains the safest guide. You notice how often people pause before making decisions. The ancient world rewards observation. Rushing rarely improves anything. A curious clue uncovered at several prehistoric camps comes from preserved pollen grains trapped within layers of ancient soil. These microscopic particles allow scientists to reconstruct the surrounding vegetation with remarkable detail, revealing forests, grasslands, flowering plants, and changing climates that vanished long ago. Something almost invisible has become a window into forgotten landscapes. By midday, the group reaches a small clearing where sunlight warms the open ground. Lunch is shared beneath the shade of tall oaks. Fresh herbs gathered during the walk add gentle flavour to roasted roots. Smoked meat from earlier hunts provides steady nourishment. Nearby, children watch ants carrying tiny fragments of leaves many times their own size. One little boy laughs quietly as an ant stubbornly changes direction after meeting a pebble that seems enormous from its perspective. The elder beside him smiles. Then he says something that causes the children to look more carefully. Perhaps he is reminding them that even the smallest creatures know how to work together. The lesson seems to land gently. After eating, everyone rests for a while. The breeze carries the pleasant fragrance of warm grass mixed with distant pine. Clouds drift lazily overhead. You lie back for a moment and watch them change shape. One resembles a mammoth. Another looks almost like a soaring bird. It is surprisingly easy to understand why people everywhere have imagined stories hidden within the sky. The peaceful afternoon is interrupted only by a distant rumble. You sit up. Far beyond the hills, dark clouds gather. They remain several valleys away. Still, everyone notices. Several adults quietly begin discussing whether tomorrow's route should change. No one appears worried, only thoughtful. The weather deserves respect. Exactly how Ice Age communities predicted approaching storms can never be known in full. They almost certainly relied on repeated observations of clouds, wind, humidity, bird behavior, and countless subtle details that became familiar through lifelong experience. Some knowledge leaves no archaeological trace, yet its importance is impossible to overlook. The group begins returning towards the camp before evening. Along the path, you notice fresh sap dripping from a damaged pine tree. One woman carefully collects a little using a flat piece of bark. The sticky resin will later help repair tools or waterproof bindings. Nothing useful escapes attention. Even injured trees quietly contribute. Back at the meadow, several teenagers strengthen the edges of the shelters using fresh branches gathered during the walk. The recent increase in river flow has reminded everyone that heavy rain could arrive without much warning. Preparing now takes far less effort than repairing later. The younger children help gather armfuls of dry grass to replace bedding inside the shelters. The fresh grass smells sweet and clean. It transforms the sleeping spaces immediately. One easily overlooked detail from excavated camps is the repeated replacement of plant bedding. Tiny remains of grasses and reeds preserved beneath ancient occupation layers suggest that people regularly refreshed sleeping areas to improve comfort and cleanliness. Simple comforts mattered then just as they do now. Evening slowly settles across the valley. The distant storm never reaches your camp. Instead, it paints the western horizon with soft shades of purple and gold before fading into the night. The fire glows steadily. Dinner cooks gently above glowing coals. Someone quietly repairs a basket woven from river reeds. Another smooths a wooden handle until it fits comfortably in the palm. Children become sleepy long before the meal is finished. One by one, they curl beneath warm animal skins while listening to quiet conversation. You look around the circle. Everything seems wonderfully ordinary. No grand discoveries, no dramatic adventures, only people paying attention to a changing world. Perhaps that has always been humanity's greatest strength. Not perfect knowledge, not complete control, simply the willingness to notice what yesterday teaches about tomorrow. The stars slowly emerge above the peaceful valley as the last light fades beyond the hills. The river continues its quiet journey through the darkness, carrying melted snow, fallen leaves, and reflections of distant constellations towards places you will never see, wrapped in warmth beside the fire. You realize that adapting to change is not a single remarkable act. It is a gentle habit practiced every day, one careful observation at a time. Morning comes wrapped in a soft blanket of low clouds. The sun is somewhere above them, but its light reaches the meadow as a gentle silver glow instead of bright gold. A cool breeze moves through the tall grass, carrying the fresh scent of damp earth and wild mint growing near the riverbank. Tiny droplets cling to every leaf, and when you brush past them, they leave cool traces across your hands. The camp wakes slowly. A child yawns while stretching beneath a fur covering. Someone quietly feeds thin branches into the fire until cheerful flames begin dancing once more. Nearby, an older woman stirs a pot suspended above the glowing coals. Steam rises into the cool air, bringing with it the earthy aroma of roots and herbs gathered over the past several days. You notice something interesting. No one seems eager to leave for the first time in many weeks. There is no sense that the camp will soon be packed away. Instead, people begin improving what already exists. The shelters receive new layers of woven branches. Additional stones are placed around the hearth. Fresh sleeping grass is spread inside each dwelling. It feels less like passing through and more like settling in. Certain places naturally encouraged longer stays. Reliable rivers, plentiful fish, edible plants, workable stone, and nearby hunting grounds made some locations especially valuable. While many Upper Paleolithic communities remained mobile, they often returned to these favoured places again and again, sometimes staying for extended periods when conditions allowed. You help carry several armfuls of reeds from the edge of the river. The long green stalks bend easily without breaking. Their smooth surfaces feel cool against your palms. Back at camp, they are woven carefully into the outer walls of one shelter. The work is surprisingly satisfying. Each reed slides neatly beside the last. Little by little, gaps disappear. The shelter becomes sturdier without becoming heavier. Nearby, two teenagers gather smooth stones from the river rather than just carrying them randomly. They arrange them into a clear walking path leading from the fire toward the sleeping areas. The path is modest, only a few steps long, yet everyone immediately begins using it. Small improvements quietly shape daily life. You smile at the thought. Even before villages existed, people appreciated convenience. As the morning continues, several children wander toward the shallow edge of the river carrying little woven baskets. You follow at a comfortable distance. The water is clear enough to reveal every pebble beneath the surface. Minnows dart between waving plants while larger fish rest in deeper pools where the current slows. The children are not trying to catch anything. Instead, they search for freshwater shells washed onto the sandy bank. Some are plain, others shimmer softly with pale shades of cream and silver. A little girl holds one up proudly. Sunlight catches its smooth inner surface. It glows almost like polished bone. People living near rivers often found countless useful materials waiting along the shoreline. Smooth stones became tools, reeds became baskets, Clay could be shaped before drying. Shells sometimes became ornaments or small containers. The river offered far more than water. You continue downstream until you reach a quiet bend where the current forms a gentle pool. An older man sits patiently beside the water holding a simple fishing spear. He hardly moves. Minutes pass. The only sounds are flowing water and distant birds calling from the trees. Then, with one smooth motion, the spear enters the water. A moment later, it rises again. Dinner has become a little more certain. Fishing probably played a larger role in some prehistoric communities than the people once imagined. Excavations at riverside sites have uncovered fish bones, hooks made from bone, and specialized tools suggesting that aquatic resources could provide dependable nourishment, especially during certain seasons. Exactly how heavily different groups relied on fish varied greatly from one landscape to another. The afternoon grows warmer as clouds gradually drift apart. Sunlight spreads across the meadow, filling the air with the sweet fragrance of flowering plants. Butterflies float lazily between blossoms. Bees hum contentedly. The entire valley seems alive with quiet activity. Back in camp, you notice several people working together around a flat piece of ground. They remove larger stones, level the soil, press it firm using smooth logs, curious. You watch for a while. Soon the purpose becomes clear. The space creates a cleaner area for preparing food and working on tools. It is not a building, not a permanent flaw, simply an improvement that makes everyday tasks easier. One subtle discovery from prehistoric camps comes from repeated layers of compacted ground around hearths and work areas. These worn surfaces suggest that people often organized frequently used spaces with surprising care, returning to the same spots day after day. You find this strangely comforting. Human beings have always enjoyed creating order, even a little. As the afternoon continues, children invent another game. They collect small sticks and build tiny shelters beside the larger ones. Some stand straight, others lean awkwardly before collapsing into cheerful piles. The adults watch with amused smiles. No one interrupts. The children are practicing without realizing it. Learning often hides inside play. Nearby, an elderly woman sits beneath the shade of a willow tree weaving a new carrying basket. Her fingers move steadily through the flexible reeds. The pattern repeats again and again until strong walls slowly emerge. You ask yourself how many baskets she has made during her lifetime. 50, 100 more. Each one probably carried roots, berries, firewood, fish, or sleeping grass. Ordinary objects often supported extraordinary lives. A surprising insight comes from the impressions left in ancient clay at some archaeological sites. Although the baskets themselves usually decayed long ago, their woven patterns remained preserved, allowing modern researchers to reconstruct remarkably sophisticated weaving techniques. Sometimes the missing object still leaves its memory behind. Late in the afternoon, several unfamiliar figures appear on the far side of the meadow. The entire camp notices. Nobody panics. Nobody reaches immediately for weapon. People simply watch. The newcomers stop at a respectful distance. They appear much like your own group. Animal skin clothing, wooden spears, leather bags. After a quiet pause, one of the elders from your camp walks forward slowly. His hands remain visible, his posture relaxed. The visitors respond in the same calm manner. You remain where you are, observing quietly. The conversation is impossible to understand from this distance, yet something important is taking place. After several minutes, both groups smile. One visitor produces several beautiful pieces of dark flint unlike any you have seen nearby. In return, your camp offers carefully prepared hides and bundles of dried fish. The exchange feels friendly. No hurried bargaining, no loud disagreement, just quiet appreciation. Evidence from widely separated archaeological sites indicates that valuable materials such as high-quality stone, shells, pigments, and ornaments sometimes travelled impressive distances. These movements hint at contacts between communities that may have helped spread ideas as well as useful resources. How often such meetings occurred remains difficult to measure. Some landscapes probably encouraged frequent encounters, others left communities isolated for long periods. As evening approaches, the visitors continue their own journey. Both groups wave gently before disappearing in opposite directions. The meadow grows peaceful once more. Dinner tonight includes fresh fish, roasted roots, and berries gathered earlier in the day. Conversation feels especially lively around the fire. Perhaps new stories arrive with the travellers. Perhaps familiar news has begun another journey across the landscape. You look around the camp, the improved shelters, the tidy pathways, the organised workspaces, the baskets, the fishing places, the friendly meeting beside the meadow, without anyone planning it. This temporary camp has begun to feel almost like a small neighbourhood. Not a village, not yet, but something quietly moving in that direction. The stars appear overhead while the river reflects their gentle light. The fire burns steadily as families settle into another peaceful evening surrounded by the comforts they have patiently created together. You realise that home is not always defined by walls or permanence. Sometimes it is simply the place where knowledge, kindness, and familiar faces gather long enough to make the wilderness feel welcoming. The morning begins with a gentle chorus of birds greeting the first light. Their songs drift across the river valley, blending with the quiet murmur of flowing water and the soft rustle of reeds swaying along the shore. A light mist lingers above the meadow, slowly lifting as the sun climbs higher. The cool air carries the scent of wet grass, flowering herbs, and smoke rising from the campfire that has faithfully greeted each new day. You stretch comfortably after another peaceful night. The camp feels settled, not permanent, not fixed, simply familiar. Over the past several days, you have learned where the best fishing pools lie, which patches of berries ripen first, and where the smoothest stones wait beside the river. Without realizing it, the landscape has begun teaching you just as it has taught every generation that passed through here. This morning, several people prepare for a journey unlike the hunting trips you have followed before. No spears are carried in great numbers. Instead, woven baskets, digging sticks, and leather pouches take their place. Curiosity guides today's walk. You join the small group as it leaves the camp and follows the river downstream. The path winds through broad grasslands where tiny flowers cover the ground like scattered stars. Bees drift lazily between blossoms, and butterflies rise gently from the grass as you pass. Everything feels wonderfully alive. After an hour of easy walking, the group reaches a wide clearing where several kinds of wild grasses grow taller than your knees. The older members stop almost immediately. They kneel among the plants, examining the slender stalks with practiced eyes. Some are ignored, others receive careful attention. One woman gently rubs a seed head between her fingers. Tiny grains fall into her palm. She smiles quietly before placing them into a leather pouch. You kneel beside her. The seeds are surprisingly small, hardly impressive at first glance, yet she handles them with remarkable care. Long before farming transformed human history, people gathered wild grains in many parts of the world. These nutritious seeds could be dried, stored, and later ground into coarse flour or cooked whole. They were only one part of a varied diet, but they hinted at possibilities that future generations would eventually explore more deeply. You spend the next hour helping collect handful after handful of seed heads. The work is slow. Each stem must be handled gently so the valuable grains do not scatter onto the ground. By modern standards, it seems remarkably inefficient. Yet no one appears impatient. The harvest grows little by little. You notice that children participate as enthusiastically as adults. One little boy proudly holds up a nearly full pouch. His grandmother laughs softly and gives him an approving nod. He stands just a little taller afterward. Encouragement has always been a powerful teacher. As the morning continues, The group discovers patches of wild peas climbing low shrubs. Nearby grow edible herbs whose leaves release a fresh fragrance when crushed between your fingers. The baskets slowly become heavier. Nature offers many gifts, provided you know where and when to look. Hidden among ancient grinding stones from several prehistoric camps are microscopic traces of wild cereals and other plant foods. These tiny remains have helped reveal how important gathered plants could be, alongside meat and fish. Sometimes the smallest discoveries reshape our understanding of the past. By midday, everyone settles beneath a cluster of broad oak bamboo trees. Lunch is shared in comfortable silence. Fresh berries, smoked fish, roasted roots. A handful of the newly gathered seeds are lightly toasted on a flat stone warmed by the sun. Their flavour is mild and pleasantly nutty. Simple, wholesome. You begin wondering whether anyone here has noticed something unusual. Each year, the same useful plants return to many of the same places. Seeds fall, new stalks appear. The cycle quietly repeats itself. Nearby, one of the younger women empties several seed heads onto the ground after removing only part of the harvest. At first, it seems accidental. Then you realise she is leaving many seeds behind. Whether this is intentional or simply practical is impossible to know. Still, the moment makes you think. Across different regions of the ancient world, people gradually became more familiar with the life cycles of useful plants. They observed when seeds sprouted, how weather influenced growth, and which places consistently produced abundant harvests. These observations laid important foundations for developments that would emerge thousands of years later. Exactly when deliberate cultivation first began differed greatly from one part of the world to another. The journey toward agriculture was long, gradual, and far from identical across human societies. After resting, the group continues farther downstream until the river widens into a broad marsh. Tall reeds sway gently in the breeze. Waterbirds glide silently. Across shallow pools. The muddy ground is covered with animal tracks. Deer, wild boar, foxes, countless smaller creatures. This place feels rich with life. Several people begin cutting long reeds using sharp flint blades. The bundles will become sleeping mats, basket material, and repairs for the shelters back at camp. Nothing here serves only one purpose. Even the soft reeds beneath your feet contribute to daily life. A delightful little detail comes from ancient impressions left in hardened mud where woven mats once rested. Although the reeds themselves disappeared thousands of years ago, their delicate patterns remain preserved, allowing archaeologists to glimpse the craftsmanship of people whose names have long been forgotten. The afternoon sun grows pleasantly warm. Dragonflies dart across the marsh in flashes of blue and green. Frogs call from hidden pools. A turtle slowly climbs onto a sunlit log before settling motionless. You pause to watch it. No one hurries you along. There is time for quiet observation. On the return journey, several children begin asking questions about the plants they collected. An elder patiently points to different leaves. Some are safe, some taste bitter. Some should only be gathered during certain seasons. Knowledge continues, passing gently from one generation to the next, not through long speeches, through shared experience. Back at camp, the gathered seeds receive careful attention. Several women spread them onto clean animal skins to dry in the afternoon sun. Others remove bits of stem and husk with patient fingers. Nearby, 2 flat stones are brought together. A small handful of dried seeds is placed between them. The upper stone moves slowly, back and forth, back and forth. Soon a coarse meal begins collecting beneath the edges. The smell is warm and slightly sweet. The flour is mixed with water into a simple paste before being cooked upon a heated stone beside the fire. The finished cakes are thin, oaky crisp around the edges, soft in the centre. They're unlike anything you have tasted during your journey. Simple ingredients transformed through careful effort. The camp shares them eagerly. No one treats them as unusual. Just another welcome meal provided by the landscape. As evening settles over the valley, golden light washes across the meadow. The river glows like polished bronze. Smoke rises gently into the calm sky. People sit comfortably around the fire repairing baskets woven from today's reeds. Children quietly sort colourful seeds into little piles, fascinated by their different shapes and sizes. You realise that every day in this ancient world adds another layer of understanding. Not because someone invents a great new idea overnight, because thousands of careful observations slowly gather together. One season teaches another. One generation teaches the next. Small discoveries accumulate until they quietly change the future. The stars appear one by one above the peaceful valley as the fire settles into its familiar evening rhythm. Around you rest baskets filled with gathered seeds, freshly woven reeds, and simple meals prepared through patient hands. Looking across the quiet camp, you sense that humanity is standing at the edge of another long chapter. No one knows it yet, but these humble moments of noticing plants, collecting seeds, and remembering seasons are gently planting ideas that will one day reshape the entire world. The river greets you with a quiet shimmer beneath the first light of dawn. Gentle ripples catch the pale colours of the sky, turning silver, then soft gold as the sun slowly rises above the eastern hills. A cool breeze brushes across the water and carries the scent of fresh reeds, damp clay, and flowering shrubs growing along the banks. You stand for a long moment without speaking. The camp behind you is beginning to wake. Smoke rises in thin, graceful strands from the morning fire. Someone laughs softly. A child runs after another through the grass before slowing down, careful not to disturb a family of ducks resting near the shoreline. The place has changed since you first arrived, not because anyone planned to transform it, simply because people have lived here. The footpaths are clearer now. The hearth is surrounded by smooth stones darkened from many evenings of fire. Bundles of reeds lean neatly against one shelter. Fishing spears rest in the same familiar place every morning. The landscape has gently accepted human presence without losing its own quiet beauty. You begin helping repair one of the shelters. The wooden frame remains strong, but several bindings have loosened after weeks of steady use. Fresh strips of softened hide replace the older ones. Your fingers move carefully through the knots. The leather feels smooth, warm from the morning sun. A few children watch with quiet interest before wandering off to imitate the work using tiny sticks gathered from the edge of the meadow. You smile. Every generation seems eager to copy the hands that came before. As the morning unfolds, you notice that fewer people speak about leaving. Instead, conversations revolve around improving the camp. Someone suggests placing another fire pit closer to the river, where fish can be prepared more easily. Another recommends storing dried wood beneath an overhanging rock to protect it from unexpected rain. No formal meeting takes place. Ideas simply drift from one conversation to another until everyone quietly begins working. It feels wonderfully natural. Across several parts of the ancient world, some communities gradually spent longer periods in especially productive places. Rich fishing grounds, dependable fresh water, abundant plants, and reliable game encouraged people to return season after season. Over time, familiar camps became places layered with memory as much as practicality. You walk toward the river, where several older women are sorting smooth stones collected over many months. The piles seem strangely organized, large stones in one place, flat stones in another, rounded pebbles nearby. Nothing appears random. One flat stone has become polished through repeated grinding. Its surface shines softly beneath the sunlight. You run your hand across it. The center feels noticeably smoother than the edges. Thousands of gentle movements have left their quiet signature. Microscopic scratches preserved on ancient grinding stones allow modern researchers to identify the seeds, roots, and minerals that were processed upon them, even after thousands of years. The tools still remember the work they performed. The thought lingers pleasantly in your mind. Objects remember, not with words, with where nearby. Several children gather clay from the riverbank. The soft earth squeezes pleasantly between their fingers. They laugh while shaping little animals that resemble deer, birds, and fish. One tiny mammoth leans awkwardly to one side before collapsing entirely. The children burst into quiet giggles. No one scolds them for wasting time. The clay simply returns to the river when they are finished. Perhaps every invention begins as play. By late morning the camp grows busier. Fresh fish are cleaned beside the water. Roots gathered yesterday are sliced into thin pieces for drying. Bundles of herbs hang beneath a simple shelter where the breeze can move freely around them. The air fills with gentle fragrances, fresh mint, wood smoke, drying reeds, warm earth. Everything blends into a comforting scent that already feels like home. You wander toward the edge of the meadow where several teenagers are carefully placing long branches into the ground. At first, the arrangement seems puzzling. Then you notice that they are creating a simple rack. Soon strips of fish are draped across the poles where cool air and gentle smoke will preserve them. Nothing about the structure is complicated, yet it solves an important problem. Food that lasts through changing weather offers peace of mind. You would probably walk past such a frame without giving it much thought, yet small features like these have quietly shaped human history. Food storage did not suddenly appear with farming. Long before fields of grain covered the landscape, people were already experimenting with drying, smoking, and protecting valuable meals from spoilage whenever local conditions allowed. The afternoon sun climbs higher. Heat settles gently across the valley. Dragonflies skim low over the river, while turtles bask upon warm stones near the shore. You sit beneath a willow tree where an elder is repairing a fishing net made from twisted plant fibers. The pattern repeats patiently, loop, pull, tighten, loop again. The rhythm becomes almost hypnotic. You ask yourself how many hours of quiet work disappear into ordinary objects. A basket, a net, a spear, a cloak, each carries invisible time within it. Ancient impressions preserved in waterlogged soils have revealed fragments of woven fibers that rarely survive elsewhere. Such discoveries remind us that much of prehistoric craftsmanship was created from materials that usually vanished long before archaeologists arrived. How much knowledge disappeared with those lost fibers is impossible to measure. Still, enough has survived to reveal remarkable skill. Clouds gather briefly during the afternoon before drifting harmlessly toward the mountains. Their passing shadows cool the meadow for a few peaceful minutes. Children chase one another through alternating patches of sunlight and shade. An elderly man watches them with quiet amusement while sharpening a bone needle. His hands move more slowly now than those of the younger adults. Even so, the needle emerges perfectly shaped. Experience has its own steady rhythm. As evening approaches, something unusual happens. Several visitors arrive from another riverside camp you met days earlier. This time they carry no trade goods, only stories. Soon both groups gather around the enlarged fire. Someone demonstrates a new way of weaving basket rims that makes them stronger. Another describes a valley farther south where herds of wild horses have become especially numerous. Children from both camps invent games together almost immediately, as though they have known one another for years. Knowledge travels easily when people welcome one another. Perhaps the greatest discoveries spread not through conquest but through conversation. Exactly how ideas move between distant communities cannot always be traced with certainty, yet similarities in tools, ornaments, and artistic traditions found across wide regions hint that people were sharing far more than simple materials. Evening deepens, dinner stretches longer than usual, Fresh fish, roasted roots, wild herbs, thin cakes made from gathered seeds. The visitors praise the meal. Laughter rises gently around the fire before fading into comfortable silence. You lean back and watch sparks drift upward. Each one disappears into the immense darkness above. The camp feels different tonight, not larger, not richer, simply more connected. The valley beyond remains wild. Animals still follow ancient paths, the river still chooses its own course, yet within this peaceful gathering, you can almost sense another future quietly taking shape. Not through sudden invention, not through dramatic change, but through people returning, remembering, sharing, building upon yesterday instead of beginning again each morning. The stars fill the sky while the voices around the fire gradually grow softer. Familiar faces and newly arrived friends settle beneath warm coverings as the last embers glow beside the river. Surrounded by quiet companionship and countless small improvements made over many seasons, you begin to understand how a temporary camp can slowly become something deeper, a place not defined by walls, but by memory, belonging, and the gentle habit of coming home. The dawn arrives almost unnoticed. A faint glow spreads across the eastern horizon, while the stars quietly surrender to the coming day. The river moves with its familiar steady rhythm, reflecting streaks of pale pink and soft amber. Mist curls above the water before drifting across the meadow, wrapping the grasses in a gentle veil that slowly dissolves beneath the growing warmth of the morning. You wake to sounds that have become deeply familiar. The crackle of fresh wood settling into the fire, the splash of someone filling water containers, the quiet laughter of children who have already discovered something interesting along the riverbank. Weeks ago, each sound belonged to a world that felt wonderfully unfamiliar. Now they feel comforting. You realize that you no longer think about surviving every moment. Instead, you think about living. There is an important difference. You walk toward the fire where breakfast is already being prepared. Thin cakes made from gathered seeds warm on flat stones. Fish caught before sunrise roast gently over glowing coals. Bundles of fragrant herbs release their fresh aroma into the cool morning air. The meal feels almost effortless. Of course you know better. Every bite represents countless quiet decisions made over many seasons. Someone remembered where the fish gather. Someone recognized the useful plants. Someone repaired the baskets. Someone protected the fire through another cold night. Civilization often appears in history books as a sudden beginning, marked by cities, monuments, and written records. Yet from where you are sitting, the transition feels much gentler. It resembles a long sunrise rather than the flip of a switch. You notice several families preparing for another day of ordinary work. One group heads toward the river. Another walks into the forest carrying digging sticks and woven baskets. Two older hunters leave with spears resting comfortably across their shoulders. No one announces who will do what. The responsibilities have become part of daily life. You decide to remain near camp today. There is much to observe. The youngest children gather around an elderly woman who has begun teaching them how to braid plant fibers into cord. Tiny fingers struggle at first. The strands slip apart, the braid twists unevenly. No one becomes frustrated. The lesson continues patiently. One child finally succeeds in making a short piece of sturdy cord. His eyes widen with quiet pride. The woman smiles warmly before handing him another bundle of fibers. Learning never really ends. You begin helping another family repair a shelter damaged slightly by several days of wind. Fresh branches are added carefully. The walls become stronger. The roof sheds rain more effectively. The improvements seem small, yet you imagine them repeated over hundreds of years. One better knot, one stronger frame, one clever way of keeping water outside. Progress often arrives in tiny steps. Excavated settlements from later prehistoric periods sometimes reveal generations of rebuilding in exactly the same locations. Older post holes lie beneath newer ones. showing how people gradually improve familiar places instead of abandoning them entirely. The earth quietly remembers every version. As the morning passes, several visitors return from the forest carrying unusual pieces of stone. Their colours differ from anything found nearby. One shines deep green, another has tiny white crystals running through it like frozen streams. The children gather immediately. Everyone wants to touch them. The stones are admired before being placed with care beside the toolmaking area. Beautiful materials inspire curiosity. Useful materials inspire creativity. Sometimes they are the same thing. You spend part of the afternoon helping shape one of the new stones. Its surface proves harder than expected. Each careful strike produces bright flakes that scatter across the ground. The sound rings clearly through the warm air. Tap, pause, tap again. Hours pass almost unnoticed. The finished blade fits comfortably into your hand. Its edge catches the sunlight. It feels like holding many generations of shared knowledge. Some of the finest prehistoric tools were made from stone carried remarkable distances from their natural sources. Such finds suggest that ideas and materials travel together across landscapes through repeated encounters between neighbouring groups. No single journey changed everything. Thousands of ordinary meetings slowly connected the ancient world. The afternoon breeze carries the scent of flowering shrubs across the meadow. Butterflies drift lazily among them. Nearby, children continue their games. Today they pretend to build a miniature camp, complete with tiny hearths made from pebbles and little shelters woven from grass stems. One child carefully places smooth stones into a perfect circle. Another insists that every imaginary family needs somewhere to sleep. You cannot help smiling. They are recreating the world they know. Perhaps every generation has always done this. Play quietly prepares children for tomorrow. Later, you follow the river a short distance upstream. The banks have become more familiar than ever. You recognize the willow tree where baskets are woven, the shallow crossing where fish gather during warm afternoons, the flat rock where everyone enjoys sitting after meals, without realizing it. The landscape has become filled with memories. Places matter because of what happens there, not simply because they exist. A remarkable pattern appears in many ancient landscapes. Communities often return to particular springs, river bends, caves, and hilltops for countless generations, even after long periods of absence. These places continue drawing people back, almost as though memory itself had become part of the land. Whether stories helped preserve these locations or whether practical advantages alone guided the returns is difficult to separate completely. Most likely, both work together. As evening approaches, the hunters return, their pace is relaxed. Today they carry no large animals. Instead, they bring several rabbits and baskets filled with edible plants discovered during the journey. No one seems disappointed. The camp has enough. Success is measured differently here. Enough food, enough warmth, enough companionship, enough knowledge passed forward. The fire grows brighter as darkness gently settles across the valley. Dinner is shared slowly. Someone tells a humorous story that causes quiet laughter to ripple around the circle. Another person demonstrates a new knot learned from travellers who visited several days earlier. Within minutes, everyone begins copying it. A useful idea spreads almost effortlessly. You sit back and watch the firelight dance across familiar faces. The children who once watched every task from a distance now help prepare meals and repair tools. Teenagers who practiced with toy spears now join hunting expeditions. The oldest members contribute wisdom gathered over lifetimes of careful observation. Each generation supports the next. You begin reflecting on everything you have witnessed. Fire, stone, migration, storytelling, art, family, fishing, shelters, trade, patience. None of these appeared overnight. Each emerged gradually through thousands of ordinary moments just like today. Perhaps civilization is not something people invented. Perhaps it slowly grew from countless acts of cooperation repeated until they became tradition. The moon rises above the quiet river. casting a silver path across the water that gently shimmers with every passing ripple. Around you, the camp settles into peaceful silence as families drift towards sleep beneath carefully stitched coverings. The wilderness has not disappeared. Wolves still roam distant forests. Birds will migrate with the changing seasons. Rivers will continue carving valleys long after everyone here is gone. Yet something lasting has already taken root. People have learned not only how to survive together, they have learned how to belong together. And that quiet discovery may have been one of humanity's greatest turning points long before the first city ever rose beyond the horizon. The final morning of your long journey arrives with extraordinary gentleness. The sky begins as a deep blue canvas sprinkled with the last fading stars. One by one they disappear as dawn slowly unfolds across the valley. A thin layer of mist rises from the river, drifting silently over the meadow before dissolving into the cool morning air. The familiar scent of wood smoke lingers around the camp, blending with fresh grass, damp earth, and the sweet fragrance of wildflowers opening to greet another day. You pause beside the fire. Its glowing embers have become old friends, so have the people gathered around it. Children who once seemed shy now confidently help prepare breakfast. The older hunters move a little more slowly than before, yet their eyes continue scanning the landscape with the same quiet attention. The elders speak softly while repairing a basket whose woven sides have carried food through many seasons. Nothing remarkable seems to be happening. Perhaps that is the remarkable part. History often celebrates dramatic moments. The ordinary days are the ones that truly shape a life. You walk toward the river as sunlight reaches the water. The surface reflects the sky so perfectly that it almost feels like another world beneath your feet. Fish move lazily through the clear current. Dragonflies skim just above the surface, leaving tiny ripples behind them. You kneel and let the cold water run across your fingers. The river has been your companion through changing seasons. It offered drinking water, fish, smooth stones for tools, reeds for weaving, a path through unfamiliar country, quiet places for reflection. Many of humanity's earliest enduring communities grew beside dependable rivers. Water-connected landscapes attracted animals, nourished plants, and encouraged people to return again and again until familiar stopping places slowly accumulated generations of memory. You rise and continue walking along a narrow path that now feels completely familiar. At first, weeks ago, every bend seemed new. Now you recognize each fallen tree, each cluster of berry bushes, each patch of flowering herbs. That landscape has become part of your memory. Perhaps you have become part of its memory as well. A little farther ahead, several children are collecting smooth stones from the riverbank, not because they need them immediately, simply because they know useful stones are worth keeping nearby. One little girl carefully chooses a pebble shaped almost like a perfect circle. She rubs it between her fingers before placing it inside a small leather pouch. Thousands of years from now, someone might discover a polished stone like that during an excavation and wonder why it was treasured. Some questions remain beautifully unanswered. As you return towards the camp, you notice fresh footprints crossing the soft mud. Deer visited before sunrise. Small birds have already added delicate tracks beside them. The ground quietly records every visitor. Footprints preserved beneath layers of sediment have revealed astonishing moments from prehistory. Ancient tracks have captured adults walking beside children, groups travelling together across muddy ground, and even the paths of animals crossing shortly before or after people passed the same place. For a brief moment, time itself became visible. You sit beneath the familiar willow tree while several people continue weaving baskets. The steady rhythm of their hands seems almost musical. Thread over reed, pull gently, turn, repeat. The basket slowly grows. Nothing hurried, nothing forced. One careful movement leading naturally to the next. You realize your journey has followed the same pattern. One fire, one lesson, one season, one path. Together they formed something much larger. By midday the camp grows pleasantly busy. Fresh fish roast above glowing coals. Roots gathered yesterday are cleaned and sorted. Someone sharpens a stone blade that has served faithfully through many hunts. Nearby, children teach an even younger child how to braid plant fibres. The newest teacher cannot be more than 10 years old. Knowledge has already begun passing through another generation. No ceremony marks the moment. It simply happens. That may be one of the quiet miracles of humanity. Learning survives because people willingly share it. You think back to the beginning of your journey, the first cave, the carefully protected fire, the flint tools, the mammoths crossing distant grasslands, the long winter, the changing seasons, the painted hands resting upon cool stone, the rivers followed through unfamiliar valleys, the visitors welcome beside the evening fire. None of those memories stand alone. Each connects to the next. Archaeologists sometimes describe prehistory through artifacts, dates, and layers of soil. Those details are invaluable. Yet they also hint at something less tangible. Behind every stone tool stood a patient craftsperson. Behind every hearth rested a family. Behind every worn pathway walked countless feet carrying hope, responsibility, and quiet determination. The afternoon brings one final walk. You climb the rocky hill overlooking the valley. The breeze feels pleasantly cool against your face. Below, the river winds through forests and open meadows before disappearing into the distance. Animals continue following ancient trails. Birds circle above the wetlands. Smoke rises gently from the little camp that has become so familiar. The world carries on exactly as it should. For a long while, you simply stand there. You think about survival. At the beginning of this journey, the word seemed to mean finding food, making fire, or escaping winter. Now it feels much larger. Survival meant remembering, teaching, sharing, repairing instead of replacing, watching before acting, helping without being asked, finding beauty even when life demanded hard work. Humanity endured because knowledge accumulated little by little. No single invention changed everything. No lone hero solved every problem. Progress grew quietly through cooperation repeated across thousands of generations. The first permanent villages would eventually appear. Fields would be planted. Animals would be domesticated. Cities would rise. Writing would preserve voices that once existed only around evening fires. Yet those later achievements rested upon the foundations built by people very much like the ones surrounding you now. As the sun begins lowering toward the western hills, you make your way back to the camp. Dinner is shared peacefully. Conversation rises and falls like the nearby river. Children become sleepy before the meal is finished. The fire settles into glowing embers. Above, the first stars begin appearing once again. They are the same stars that watched every step of your journey. You settle comfortably beside the warmth. The sounds of the valley grow softer. The cool evening air carries the scent of pine and wood smoke. Somewhere in the distance, an owl calls once before silence gently returns. You close your eyes for a moment, grateful for everything this ancient world has quietly taught you. Its greatest lesson was never simply how to stay alive, it was how to live together. The fire burns a little lower now, glowing softly beneath a blanket of warm ash. Around you, the camp has become wonderfully quiet. The youngest children are asleep beneath carefully stitched animal skins. The elders rest comfortably after another day of sharing their knowledge. Beyond the gentle circle of firelight, the river continues its endless journey beneath the stars. You listen to the peaceful rhythm of flowing water. The wind moves gently through the reeds. Somewhere across the valley, distant animals continue their own quiet lives, just as they have for countless generations. The night feels safe. The darkness no longer seems unknown. It has become another familiar companion. As you let your thoughts drift, the memories of your journey settle softly beside you. The first spark of fire, the careful shaping of stone, the patient footsteps following ancient herds, the warmth of shared meals, the laughter of children learning by watching, the painted hands upon cool cave walls, the changing seasons, the welcoming rivers, the endless sky filled with stars. Each memory becomes lighter, like glowing embers slowly fading into the night. You realize that the people you have walked beside were never merely surviving. They were observing, learning, creating, caring for one another, building quiet traditions that would echo across thousands of years until they eventually reached the modern world. Even now, many of their habits remain with you. You gather with family, you share stories, you teach children, you repair what matters, you look toward tomorrow with hope. The world around you has changed beyond anything these ancient people could have imagined, yet the gentle human qualities that carried them through the uncertain seasons still remain. The fire grows quieter. The stars continue their slow journey overhead. The valley rests peacefully beneath the calm night sky. And as history gently fades into dreams, you leave this ancient camp with a quiet heart, carrying its warmth, its wisdom, and its enduring spirit into the peaceful silence of the night. Sweet dreams.